Chapter 49. Cheng Xiaofeng was dead. Without any warning, he died at the hands of Yang Kai. Last time, when Yang Kai fought with the disciples of Stormhouse, Hu Mei-er also watched from beginning to end. Although she knew that Yang Kai's strength was amazing, she didn't expect him to be this strong. Cheng Xiaofeng, who was at the first level of the initial element realm, was killed by Yang Kai with just one finger. What kind of martial skill was that? Why did it have such a strong power? The hole in Cheng Xiaofeng's forehead was clearly burned by a kind of extreme yang energy. At this moment, Hu Mei-er was panicking. After seeing Yang Kai's thunderous killing methods, she understood that Yang Kai wasn't joking. He really dared to kill, and he also had the ability to kill. Nu Tao was also extremely shocked. He had just exchanged a punch with Yang Kai, and before he could make a second move, his own junior brother had died in front of him. This unforeseen event really made him flabbergasted. "You actually killed junior brother Cheng," Nu Tao screamed. "What kind of method did you use?" The power of that finger was too strong. It was definitely an incredible martial skill. Nu Tao was a little scared, afraid that he wouldn't be able to block it. "You also want to die." Yang Kai naturally understood the principle of cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. These two people followed him here today to kill him. Facing such enemies, Yang Kai wouldn't be lenient. The situation this time was different from last time. Last time, it was only a group fight, so Yang Kai would still be lenient. But facing an enemy who wanted his life, it would be stupid to be lenient. Seeing Yang Kai hurriedly rushing towards him, Nu Tao suddenly laughed. "Stop bluffing. Give me your life." As he shouted, he punched out with both fists towards Yang Kai. His opponent was only at the tempered body realm. How much Yuan Qi could he have? The power of that move just now was definitely not small. In other words, he wouldn't be able to use that kind of method again. That's why Nu Tao was so fearless. Who would have thought that after exchanging blows, Nu Tao would realize that he was wrong? This Yang Kai could actually use Yuan Qi. Every time he fought with him, he could feel a hot energy from his moves. This energy made Nu Tao suffer again and again. Although he had a higher realm than Yang Kai, he couldn't suppress him at all. Nu Tao used all of his tricks, moving left and right. He didn't dare to confront Yang Kai directly. He only wanted to fight a battle of attrition. When Yang Kai's Yuan Qi was completely depleted, his opponent would be a fish on the chopping board. Nu Tao's idea and strategy weren't wrong. To deal with ordinary body-tempering stage disciples, this method was the most effective. It would definitely be able to take down the enemy with the least cost. But Yang Kai was different. He had just absorbed all the power of Yang Inflammation Stone from the Yang Inflammation Stone. His meridians were full of Yuan Qi. If he really continued to consume it, perhaps Nu Tao would be exhausted first. Very soon, Nu Tao realized that something was wrong. At the very beginning, Kai Yang's performance was indeed like that of a tempered body cultivator, whether it was the speed or strength of his fists. Although they were stronger than the average person, they still didn't exceed the limits of a tempered body cultivator. But with the passage of time, along with the various wounds he had inflicted on Kai Yang's body, this Kai Yang's strength was rising steadily. Each punch was faster than the previous one, and the strength behind each punch was also getting stronger and stronger. What made Nu Tao fearful the most was that the burning hot power contained within each of his moves was actually getting stronger and stronger. It was as if as time passed, this Yang Kai's strength was rapidly increasing. What was going on? When a cultivator fought, as the Yuan Qi in his body was depleted, his battle strength would only get lower and lower. How could this be reversed? In a short time, Nu Tao could no longer dodge Yang Kai's attacks. He couldn't dodge in time, and his chest was hit by Yang Kai's fist. The heavy force almost made Nu Tao breathless, and the hot energy that invaded his body was as fierce as fire. Looking at Yang Kai's red eyes, Nu Tao had the thought of retreating. After a feint, Nu Tao suddenly pulled back and quickly flew away. While gasping for breath, he shouted, Yang Kai, you killed junior brother Chung. You're dead. Initial element stage 5th level, he couldn't beat the enemy, but if he wanted to escape, the enemy couldn't do anything. Nu Tao was very confident about this because in the fight just now, he saw that Yang Kai didn't practice any body martial skill. If Nu Tao wanted to escape, Yang Kai couldn't stop him and could only watch him flee more than 10 feet away. Suddenly, Yang Kai's heart moved, and the last drop of Yang liquid in the dantian flashed to his fingertip. Immediately, Yang Kai stretched out his other hand and pulled at his fingertip, and a shocking scene appeared. This drop of Yang liquid, in the blink of an eye, turned into a blood-red blade, as thin as a cicada's wing. As soon as the blade was formed, it flew out under Yang Kai's control. With a sob sound, a blood-red shadow cut through the air and poured into Nu Tao's back. Nu Tao's running body suddenly stiffened, and with a thump, he fell to the ground. The dense forest was quiet, and occasionally the sound of insects and birds could be heard. Yang Kai was gasping for breath, and his whole body was battered and exhausted. Hu Mei Er's legs were trembling, and her whole body was ice cold, and her heart was cold. She didn't leave because she thought that when Yang Kai couldn't hold on, he would ask her for help. At that time, she would be able to achieve her goal. But what she didn't expect was that the 2 Stormhouse disciples who came to kill Yang Kai were actually killed by Yang Kai instead. These 2 people were both at the initial element stage, one at the 1st stage, and the other at the 5th stage. They joined hands to deal with a tempered body stage Yang Kai, and in the end, not only did they fail, they even lost their lives. Everything was so unreal, so inexplicable. Suddenly, Hu Mei Er's expression was startled. She found that Yang Kai had turned his head and was staring at her with a gaze that seemed to want to eat her alive. Deep in his eyes, there was a glimmer of killing intent. Hu Mei Er subconsciously retreated a few steps. If you dare to move, you will die. Yang Kai's cold voice sounded. I won't move. Hu Mei Er's voice carried a bit of a sob, and her lower abdomen spasmed, almost causing her to lose her self-control on the spot. She was really frightened and wasn't sure whether or not Yang Kai wanted to kill her. In a matter of life and death, what could a young girl like her do? Although she was successful in the field of love, her strength really wasn't high. Yang Kai didn't care about her anymore, and instead rushed to Qing Xiaofeng and Nu Tao's side, wantonly plundering their bodies. After a short while, Yang Kai found some silver and 2 bottles of pills. There weren't many pills left in the 2 bottles, but they were still worth some money. It wasn't a loss, but it was a pity that he didn't have the yang liquid he refined. Now, there was nothing left in the dantian, and after the big battle, more than half of the true yang yuan qi in his meridians had been consumed. Are you short on money? Hu Mei Er saw that Yang Kai was robbing the 2 corpses and couldn't help but muster up her courage to say, I can give it to you as long as you don't kill me, the current Hu Mei Er. How could she still dare to flirt in front of Yang Kai? Even her words were carefully spoken. Yang Kai looked at her indifferently. I'm not a bandit. Why would I need your money? If I lack money, I can earn it myself. Chapter 50. Hu Mei Er didn't dare to reply. She was afraid of angering Yang Kai if she spoke too much. Come here. Yang Kai suddenly waved at her. Hu Mei Er's delicate body trembled, tears welling up in her eyes. She bit her lips and looked at Yang Kai pleadingly, but her feet didn't dare to move at all. What are you afraid of? I'm telling you to come here. So come here. Yang Kai was a bit impatient. Helpless, Hu Mei Er could only walk towards Yang Kai. She slowly stopped 5 steps away from Yang Kai and looked at him with some fear. Sensing her fear, Yang Kai found it funny, but he still kept a straight face and said, Be good, I won't touch you. There was an irresistible sense of dominance in his indifferent tone. Hu Mei Er nodded vigorously. I'll be good. And Yang Kai was satisfied. He bent down and carried Nu Tao's body on his shoulder. He looked at Ching Xiaofeng's body and said, "Bring him along." Although it was disgusting, Hu Mei'er didn't dare to disobey. She squatted down and carried Ching Xiaofeng's body on her back. Although she was a young woman, she was still a cultivator. Carrying 100 or so pounds wasn't much of a burden to her. "Follow me." Yang Kai looked around and then walked deeper into Black Wind Forest. Hu Mei'er didn't know what he wanted to do, but she didn't dare to ask. She could only blindly follow. Yang Kai wanted to dispose of the bodies. Although the place just now was considered deep in the forest, he couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be any men who would be interested and run there for a rendezvous. If someone saw it, it would be a troublesome matter. Although the probability of this happening was small, he had to guard against it. The cause of Ching Xiaofeng's and Nu Tao's deaths were very special. Both of them had their vital points pierced through by a scorching hot Yuan Li. If Stormhouse were to follow this trail and investigate, they might find out that it was him. So Yang Kai had to throw the bodies far away so that Stormhouse's people would never find them. The two of them walked one after the other into the depths of the forest. Hu Mei'er hesitated several times, but she endured it. More than 2 hours later, a lake suddenly appeared in front of them. Yang Kai's eyes lit up. This was it. After telling Hu Mei'er to put down the corpses, Yang Kai went to find 2 large rocks and tied them to Ching Xiaofeng and Nu Tao's corpses before sinking them to the bottom of the lake. Clapping his hands, Yang Kai pondered for a moment and said, "You are now my accomplice. You should know what to do, right?" After saying that, he turned his head and looked at her indifferently. Hearing this, Hu Mei'er was not shocked, but rather delighted. She nodded repeatedly. I know, for Yang Kai to say such words. It meant that he didn't have any malicious intentions towards her. Her life was saved. Hu Mei'er's body and mind relaxed, and she couldn't help but sigh in relief. Smart. A smart girl will always have someone who likes her. Yang Kai laughed lightly. Speaking of which, Yang Kai really didn't know what to do with Hu Mei'er. If he didn't kill her, she would always be a hidden danger. She had seen everything that happened today. If he killed her, Yang Kai couldn't bring himself to do it. From beginning to end, Hu Mei'er didn't harm him. She only stood on the side and watched the show. Could it be that he killed her because of this reason? That was a little too unreasonable. After walking for so long, Yang Kai also thought it through. This time, it was Ching Xiaofeng and Nu Tao who took the initiative to provoke him. If he didn't kill them, would he just sit there and wait for death? So even if Hu Mei'er exposed this matter, Yang Kai wasn't afraid in the slightest. You've killed many people? Hu Mei'er's courage grew a lot as she looked at Yang Kai and asked. Yang Kai shook his head. This is my first time killing someone, but I saw that you were very experienced. When you killed them, you didn't even blink. It didn't seem like it was your first time. Hu Mei'er was puzzled. Hearing her words, Yang Kai's brows wrinkled. That's right, it was his first time killing someone. Why wasn't he afraid at all? Although he didn't feel any excitement, he definitely didn't feel any fear. At that time, he only cared about fighting. His mind was only filled with thoughts of killing them. Thinking about it now, he felt that it was quite inconceivable. It's up to you to believe it or not. Yang Kai didn't explain further. After walking half a circle around the lake in front of them, Yang Kai came to a place far away from the corpses. Then he stopped walking and dove into the lake. In this battle, Yang Kai's body also had many injuries. He had to wash up before going back. Hu Mei'er stood by the lake and waited. She also wanted to go in. If it was 2 hours ago, she would definitely go in and tease Yang Kai. Now, she didn't have the guts. When Yang Kai finished washing up, Hu Mei'er opened her mouth and said, "Wait for me for a while. I'll also go wash up." Just now, she had carried a corpse for such a long distance. Hu Mei'er felt uncomfortable all over. Women always loved cleanliness. Okay, Yang Kai wrung out his clothes, and then lay down on a rock by the lake to bask in the sun and recover his strength. Not daring to take off her clothes, Hu Mei Er scuttled into the lake. Her graceful body was like a fish swimming in the lake. From time to time, she would sneak a glance at Yang Kai, but found that he didn't even open his eyes. This made Hu Mei Er feel even more shocked. He wasn't the least bit moved. After a long while, Hu Mei Er finally finished washing up and came to the shore. Her clothes clung to her body, fully displaying her exquisite and enchanting figure. Without any hesitation, she came to Yang Kai's side. Her face was flushed red as she sat on the rock to bask in the sun. Kai Yang opened his eyes and sized her up, sweeping his eyes over her from top to bottom. Hu Mei Er lowered her head. "Your figure is very good." Yang Kai nodded slightly. Hu Mei Er bit her red lips and said with a bitter expression, "Actually, I have never done that kind of thing with a man. Even the one who has touched my body is only you. These past few years, the reason why I did that was because I wanted to recruit more talents for the sect, and also to sow discord between High Heaven Pavilion and Storm House's disciples. Pestering you is also for this purpose." Hearing this, Yang Kai stared blankly at her and gave her a deep look. "You don't believe me?" Hu Mei Er's face flushed red. She had never told anyone about this secret. Everyone thought that she was really a promiscuous woman who was willing to have sex with anyone. On the surface, they called her little princess and young miss, but behind her they called her a slut. "I believe you," Yang Kai nodded, "but what does that have to do with me?" Hu Mei Er's expression darkened, and she bitterly smiled. "I won't pester you again in the future." This time's matter was a big blow to her. Hearing her say this, Yang Kai couldn't help but feel relieved. He had finally gotten rid of this trouble. After Hu Mei Er's clothes were dry, the two of them left the lake. In order to avoid attracting attention, Yang Kai and Hu Mei Er parted ways early on and returned to their respective sects. After returning to the wooden house to rest for a while, Yang Kai got up and went to the coiling dragon stream. This time's battle had completely exhausted his days of bitter cultivation. Naturally, he had to quickly replenish the true Yang Yuan Qi in his body. Otherwise, the next time he encountered something like this, he wouldn't be able to deal with it. Moreover, he had used the Yang liquid twice today. The results of the experiment made Yang Kai very excited. He really didn't expect the Yang liquid to be so strong. He was only at the tempered body 8 stage now. If his cultivation was higher, wouldn't the power of the Yang liquid become even stronger? No matter what the reason was, Yang Kai now had a kind of impatient desire to cultivate. Chapter 51. Arriving at the coiling dragon stream and sitting down, Yang Kai was preparing to begin his cultivation when he suddenly remembered something. Reaching into his bosom, he fumbled around for a moment before he took out a seed. This seed was the one that was given to him when he bought the Yang Inflammation Stone from the blood group stall. It was said to be the seed of a low-grade earth-level spirit fruit, the Three Suns fruit. Yang Kai wanted to plant it. Although he didn't know how many years it would take to grow, it wouldn't take much effort. Moreover, this place was full of Yang Qi, so it was undoubtedly the most suitable place to plant this fruit tree. But as soon as he took out the seed, Yang Kai found that something was wrong. When he saw this seed during the day, it didn't have any abnormalities. There was only a weak Yang Qi inside, almost negligible. But now, this seed had turned red, crystal clear, just like a ruby. Holding it in his hand, Yang Kai could even feel the rhythmic movement of the seed. It was like a human's heart beating, surging with vitality. Moreover, at this moment, the Yang Qi inside the seed was many times larger than it was during the day. After staring at it for a moment, Yang Kai suddenly woke up. He suddenly understood where the drop of Yang liquid that disappeared from his dantian had gone. It was clearly absorbed by this seed. Otherwise, how could such an ordinary seed undergo such an earth-shattering change? A drop of Yang liquid, without the help of external objects, would take Yong Kai several days to condense. Yong Kai almost couldn't resist absorbing the yang liquid from the seed. But after thinking about it, Yong Kai didn't do so. This seed clearly had a big change. If it was planted, what would it look like when it bloomed and bore fruit? The youth's curiosity and thirst for knowledge were incomparably strong compared to the precious drop of yang liquid. Yong Kai wanted to see what would happen after the seed was planted. After carefully considering for a moment, Yong Kai began to move. First, he found a piece of soft soil nearby, carefully dug up the soil, and planted the seed. Then he went to find some water to water it. After finishing this, Yong Kai sat down and began to circulate the true yang secret art. He didn't know if the investment of a drop of yang liquid would pay off. After so many days of bitter cultivation, the speed at which he absorbed yang qi was obviously faster. After a night of cultivation, the yang qi in his meridians was once again abundant. Yong Kai estimated that in another 2 to 3 days, he would be able to condense a drop of yang liquid. Compared to the first time, the efficiency was much higher. The next morning, Yong Kai practiced the tempered body technique for an hour. He had never stopped practicing the body tempering technique for a single day. What he had to do every day, besides sweeping the floor, was to practice the body tempering technique. Then he would find a junior brother to bully and earn some contribution points. The rest of the time, he would cultivate nonstop. An hour later, Yong Kai was done. He inadvertently glanced at the place where he had planted the 3 suns fruit seed last night. His expression couldn't help but freeze. On the soft ground, a 1-foot-tall sapling grew out of it. The sapling was slender, with a few fresh and tender leaves. On the small tree trunk, there were faint dark red lines intertwined. Although the sapling was small, it had a vitality that couldn't be ignored. It was struggling to break free from the shackles of the world and was growing strong. It can't be? Yong Kai felt that his brain wasn't enough. How did the 3 suns fruit tree grow so big in just one night? For a moment, Yong Kai even thought that he had lost track of time when he was cultivating, causing many days to pass. But after thinking about it carefully, this wasn't the case. The true yang yuan qi in his body didn't increase by much. It was clear that it had only been one night. Could all of this be the result of the drop of yang liquid that had seeped into the seed? It wasn't impossible. In the knowledge that Yong Kai had obtained, it only said that yang liquid had endless uses, but it didn't say that it could only be used in battle. If it was the yang liquid that caused the seed to change, then it could explain the scene in front of him. It grew a foot in one night. Could it be that in a few days it would blossom and bear fruit? Thinking up to this point, Kai Yang's heart became excited. The 3 suns fruit was an earth-grade, low-level spirit fruit. The yang energy contained within it was a great supplement to his true yang tactics. A single fruit was definitely equivalent to several days' worth of cultivation. Thinking of this, Yong Kai suddenly felt that his investment was very wise. Now all he had to do was wait and see how many days it would take for this fruit tree to blossom and bear fruit. This place was next to the coiling dragon stream, so normally no one would come here. Yong Kai had been cultivating here for many days, and besides meeting the 11th elder, he hadn't seen anyone else, so he wasn't worried that this fruit tree would be discovered. Returning to the wooden house, Yong Kai wanted to finish today's work, but after searching for a long time, he still couldn't find the broom, so he couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. After waiting for a while, a high heaven pavilion disciple with a head full of sweat came over, carrying Yong Kai's broom in his hand. Yong Kai also knew this person. He was one of Sassafras's group, and his strength was only at the tempered body 5th stage. His name was Sheng Zhen. Seeing Yong Kai standing there, he quickly stepped forward. "Brother Yong, you're back? And where did junior brother Zheng go? Why did you take away my broom?" He smiled and said, "I'm going to help you sweep the floor. Senior brother, you don't have to worry about these trivial matters in the future. Every day, one of us junior brothers will come and help you finish this work. You just have to focus on cultivating. That's not appropriate. Yang Kai heard this and quickly waved his hand. Although sweeping the floor wasn't heavy work, it still took a lot of effort. If he didn't want to stay in High Heaven Pavilion, he would have already resigned from this job. But as a trial disciple, if he didn't take on some work, he wouldn't be able to stay in High Heaven Pavilion. He said, "Brother, we brothers should help each other. Last time, if you hadn't taught Qing Xiaofeng a lesson, the junior brothers wouldn't have been able to vent their anger. Moreover, we have a lot of people, so every day, one person will come and take turns. Each person only needs to sweep the floor 2 to 3 times a month. Brother, you don't need to get up early every day and waste your time. Brother, don't refuse. If you look up to the junior brothers, then let us help you. If you look down on us, then forget it." What could Kai Yang do now that things had come to this point? He quickly said, "Then I'll have to trouble you junior brothers. Junior brother Zheng, please come in and drink a cup of water." "No, young Master Su has given a strict order. Everyone needs to work hard. If anyone dares to slack off, then they are no longer brothers. I'm leaving, brother. You also need to work hard." Saying so, he put down the broom and trotted away. Looking at his back, Yang Kai's heart warmed. That day, saving Sassafras was the right decision. This person was a true villain. If you respect him, he will return you 10 feet. It seems that in the future, he won't have to worry about wasting time sweeping the floor. Happy, Yang Kai stepped out and casually grabbed a High Heaven Pavilion disciple who seemed to be at Tempered Body 7th or 8th stage. He cupped his fists and said, "Junior brother, please enlighten me." That person's face immediately became bitter. "Brother Yang, of so many people, why did you choose me?" During this time, Yang Kai had been challenging one person every day and had already made a name for himself. Now, all of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples who were at the Tempered Body stage would feel a little scared whenever they saw Yang Kai. He was no longer the punching bag who lost every battle. Now he had won many days in a row, and his victories were quite clean. Chapter 52. Looking at his junior brother's bitter face, Yang Kai smiled and said, "Don't be so nervous. I just want to earn a few contribution points. Don't worry, I'll be very gentle. I guarantee you won't feel any pain." After 10 breaths of time, this junior brother fell to the ground, and Yang Kai walked away. Xia Ning Chong stood on the treetop and saw everything. Her eyes narrowed into crescents, and a faint smile appeared on her face. Witnessing her junior brother, who had lost 147 consecutive matches, slowly grow stronger gave birth to a sense of accomplishment. Although Yang Kai's growth had nothing to do with her, after 2 years, Xia Ning Chong had become accustomed to secretly observing this junior brother. This was like a silent guardian. Yang Kai becoming stronger made Xia Ning Chong feel happy for no reason. Beside coiling Dragon Stream, Yang Kai was still cultivating. 5 days had passed since he planted the 3 suns fruit, and the sapling had grown to a height of 1 zhang. There were big changes almost every day. At this time, the 3 suns fruit tree was swaying with the wind. 3 bright red flowers were blooming, and it would probably bear fruit in a few days. At that time, Yang Kai would be able to eat to his heart's content. These past few days, Yang Kai's cultivation had been quite fruitful. He had condensed a drop of yang liquid in his dantian, and his true yang tactics had become more and more refined. The daily task of sweeping the floor was taken over by someone else, so Yang Kai had a lot more time to cultivate. These past few days, Yang Kai had also been inquiring about Stormhouse's movements. After all, he had killed Qing Xiaofeng and knew Tao, so it was difficult to guarantee that he wouldn't attract trouble. But what made Yang Kai feel relieved was that Stormhouse hadn't made any moves. It seemed that Hu Mei-er hadn't betrayed him. This woman was still trustworthy. The 8th day of the first month had arrived, and it was finally time to calculate the contribution points. On the 8th day of last month, He had just obtained the unyielding golden skeleton. At that time, he was only at the tempered body 3rd stage. In just a month, he had already reached the tempered body 8th stage. This kind of cultivation speed was unrivaled under the heavens. Even those so-called heavenly gifted geniuses, with the help of pills, would not be able to achieve this kind of speed. After entering the contribution hall, Treasure Meng, who was sitting behind the counter, suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked at Yang Kai in amazement. He had not seen him for many days, but Yang Kai's strength had increased a lot. Treasurer Meng's surprise only lasted for a moment before he regained his composure. He wasn't an ignorant person. On the contrary, his vision far exceeded that of anyone in High Heaven Pavilion, so even though Yang Kai's strength had increased a lot, he wasn't surprised. He had seen many people who shone brightly in their youth, only to end up with nothing in the end. Treasurer Meng, Yang Kai greeted. "You're here to trade?" Old Man Meng sized him up. "And I have 59 contribution points this month, right?" Sweeping the floor gave him 10 points, and defeating a person every day gave him 2 points. This month, there were 3 days when Yang Kai was not in the sect. In total, he had fought 27 battles, but last time when he was drinking with sassafras in the sect, he was caught red-handed by a Dark Hall disciple, so 5 points were deducted. So in total, he had 59 contribution points. Not bad. What do you want to trade? 29 dead Jedi tree grass, 33 leaved chaos spirit flowers. The incense burner had not been used for many days because of the lack of materials. This thing had no use for cultivating Yuan Qi, but it had great benefits for tempering the body. Old Man Meng looked at him with a profound expression before walking into the back hall. He then took out the things that Kai Yang needed and brought them out. Yang Kai was about to reach out to take them, but Treasurer Meng took them back and asked with a smile, "Little Yang Kai, can you tell me what you ate last time in Blackwind Mountain?" He was still interested in Yang Kai's fortuitous encounter. Yang Kai spouted nonsense. "I don't know. It was just a red fruit. I ate it when I was hungry." Red fruit, red fruit. Old Man Meng fell into deep thought, but he could not think of a corresponding spirit fruit. After a while, Treasurer Meng shook his head. "Forget it, but you don't want to save up contribution points to exchange for my marrow cleansing pills?" In the past, Yang Kai had to be very careful with every little bit of contribution points he spent, but now he was very generous. This month's contribution points had just entered his account, so it was not like him to spend them all. Yang Kai smiled. "I won't exchange them. Only by working hard can I become strong. I was too short-sighted to put my hopes on a pill." Hearing this, Treasurer Meng looked at him deeply and nodded with a smile. "Not bad, not bad. I didn't expect you to be able to see this clearly. Little Yang Kai, I'll give you a piece of advice." "Please speak, Treasurer Meng." "Work hard. Don't waste your fortuitous encounter. Disciple understands." After leaving the contribution hall, Yang Kai ran towards the coiling dragon stream. After summoning the incense burner and throwing in the herbs, Yang Kai began to practice his fists and kicks at the coiling dragon stream. A familiar pressure followed, but this pressure was not something Yang Kai could withstand with his current strength. After a short while, he was already panting and exhausted, but he did not give up. Instead, he continued to practice, slowly opening his fists and kicks. Every movement was extremely difficult and obscure. His physical strength was like a flood leaking out of a dam, and his mind was also drowsy and exhausted. After a while, Yang Kai could no longer endure and fell to the ground. He forced himself to sit up and began to circulate the true Yang secret art, recovering his physical strength and mental strength. Originally, Yang Kai thought that the incense burner had no effect on cultivating Yuan Qi, but now he found that he was wrong. Under the effect of the strange fragrance, the circulation of Yang Qi in his meridians seemed to be shackled. It was extremely slow, flowing inch by inch, making people feel helpless. The strange fragrance hindered the circulation of true Yang Yuan Qi, greatly reducing the efficiency of his current cultivation. Yang Kai was not in a hurry to take back the incense burner, but decided to feel it more. He felt that the incense burner did not only have the effect of tempering the body. This thing was incomparably wonderful and was not something he could pry into at the moment. With the help of the incense burner, Yang Kai's body became stronger day by day, but the cultivation of the true Yang secret art was delayed by a lot, and the speed of absorbing Yang Qi was greatly reduced. After 2 to 3 days of cultivation, the true Yang Yuan Qi in his body did not increase by much. Could it be that the incense burner only hindered the cultivation of Yuan Qi? After experimenting for 2 to 3 days, Yang Kai felt a little discouraged. If this was really the case, then the incense burner's value would be greatly reduced. Without any other choice, Yang Kai could only decide to take back the incense burner when he recovered, so as to avoid it affecting the circulation of Yuan Qi in his body and increasing the recovery time for no reason. After another round of exhaustion, Yang Kai put the incense burner into the wordless black book, circulating the true Yang secret art. Yang Kai's expression suddenly changed, and he carefully felt it. After a while, Yang Kai's mouth showed a trace of a smile. He found that the circulation of true Yang Yuan Qi in his body was slightly faster than it was 2 days ago. The faster the circulation of Yuan Qi, the faster the absorption of Yang Qi. If it was in battle, then the explosive power would be very strong. So it was like this. The existence of the incense burner, not only did it not hinder his cultivation of Yuan Qi, it actually gave him great benefits. The Yuan Qi in his body had adapted to the pressure brought by the strange fragrance, and without the strange fragrance, it would naturally circulate faster than before. It was like a person who had adapted to carrying a 3,000 gene stone and suddenly changed the 3,000 gene stone into 300 gene stone. Then he would definitely be able to walk as fast as flying. It was the same principle. Realizing this, Yang Kai smiled. Maybe in the short term, the incense burner would only hinder his cultivation of the true Yang secret art, but in the long term, this obstruction could bring him great benefits and benefits. This was a business worth investing in. Chapter 53. 10 days after the seeds of the 3 Suns fruit tree were planted, the 3 fruits had quietly ripened. They hung on the branches in bright red, making them very lovable. Yang Kai could feel a very rich Yang Qi from these 3 fruits. In just 10 days, this earth-grade low-rank spirit fruit had grown from nothing to a ripe melon. The effect of that single drop of Yang liquid was simply too great. Carefully reaching out, Yang Kai plucked the 3 fruits and played with them in his palm for a while. The more he looked at them, the more he liked them. But no matter how much he liked them, they still had to be eaten for them to be effective. Yang Kai did not hesitate and immediately sat down cross-legged and threw a 3 Suns fruit into his mouth. The warm and sweet juice spread on the tip of his tongue, leaving a fragrance in his mouth. Once the spirit fruit entered his stomach, the true Yang tactics began to circulate. His abdomen felt like it was on fire. But for Yang Kai, who practiced the true Yang tactics, this kind of temperature was the most comfortable and even made him feel very comfortable. The Yang Yuan Qi contained in the earth-grade, mid-level spirit fruit quickly flowed into his meridians. His meridians were immediately saturated, and with a light dripping sound, a drop of Yang liquid was quietly formed. A moment later, another light dripping sound was heard. Only after 3 drops of Yang liquid had been condensed did the earth-grade, low-level spirit fruit's medicinal effect completely take effect. In the Dantian, there were already 4 drops of Yang liquid. 3 of them were just formed, and the remaining one was the result of Yang Kai's 10 days of cultivation. Because of the obstruction of the incense burner, the results of these 10 days of cultivation were rather bleak, but Yang Kai did not care. His eyes were set on the future. How could he care about such a small benefit in front of him? Moreover, Yang Kai had a faint premonition that if he ate the remaining 2 fruits, he might be able to break through to the tempered body stage, 9th level, and touch the threshold of the initial element stage. With this thought in mind, Yang Kai did not hesitate to throw the remaining 2 sun's fruits into his mouth. Yang Kai's qi dissolved in his abdomen, and a fierce burning force began to burn in his meridians. Yang Kai's skin suddenly turned red. The true Yang secret art madly revolved, and with a dripping sound, the Yang liquid in the dantian increased drop by drop. The Yang qi that overflowed from the coiling dragon stream seeped into the Yang Kai's body through his pores, cooperating with him from the inside out. The vibration of the Yuan qi in his body was getting stronger and stronger. If a knowledgeable person were to see Yang Kai's current appearance, they would be so shocked that their jaws would drop to the ground. There had never been a tempered body cultivator with such a dense Yuan qi in his body. A cultivator of the body-tempering realm had narrow meridians and a low capacity of dantian. They were unable to withstand such a huge amount of Yuan qi. Just the vibration of this Yuan qi was enough to match a cultivator of the initial element stage, but Yang Kai was only at the tempered body stage 8th level. At this moment, Yang Kai also felt a pressure. This pressure was indescribable, as if it existed between the heavens and earth. It was a shackle placed on his body, and if he did not break the shackle, he would not be able to break through. The burning hot, true Yang Yuan qi began to revolve, burning this invisible shackle. As time passed, Yang Kai could feel this layer of obstruction slowly becoming thinner and thinner. The breakthrough was imminent. Yang Kai's mind was clear, and the true Yang secret art revolved even faster. With a bang, it was as if he had broken free from a shackle. His entire body felt light, and all the pressure and discomfort disappeared. Yang Kai only felt refreshed. Tempered body stage 9th level. He stood outside the threshold of the initial element stage. Although he had broken through, the feeling from before had not disappeared. Yang Kai moved according to his will, and the 10 drops of Yang liquid stored in dantian began to revolve and spread out in all directions, penetrating into Yang Kai's 5 viscera, 6 bowels, blood, and meridians. The Yang inflammation in the Yang liquid was dissolved, burning the impurities in his body and tempering his 5 viscera, 6 bowels, and meridians. Fine steel needed to be tempered thousands of times to form, and wasn't the human body the same? Therefore, every time a cultivator broke through a great realm, they would use the energy of heaven and earth to temper their body, and in this way, their strength would increase crazily. Yang Kai had only broken through a small realm this time, so there was no extra energy of heaven and earth to use, but the Yang liquid in his body had the same effect. After a long time, Yang Kai slowly opened his eyes. He could feel that this breakthrough had brought him great progress. Just in terms of strength, it was no longer comparable to before the breakthrough. If he met Chung Xiaofeng and New Tao now, Yang Kai was confident that he could easily kill them without using the Yang liquid. In addition to the increase in strength, Yang Kai also faintly felt a trace of a concept when he broke through, but this thing was too mysterious, so he couldn't comprehend it now. He could only wait until he broke through in the future to feel it. His meridians were filled with true Yang Yuan qi, but the dantian was empty. Carefully feeling it, Yang Kai's face suddenly darkened. After so many days of hard work, it was all gone in an instant. The Yang liquid formed from the 3 sun's fruits, plus the drop of Yang liquid he had condensed before, a total of 10 drops. Now, there was not a single drop left. All of it had seeped into his body when he broke through. Although the benefits to his body were enormous, the Yang liquid was gone. But it didn't matter. As long as he had money, it was very easy to obtain Yang liquid. He just had to buy some Yang attribute precious treasures and directly absorb them. The only problem now was that Yang Kai was very poor. Apart from the loot he obtained from killing Chung Xiaofeng and New Tao, he didn't have anything else of value. Sitting in place and thinking, Yang Kai suddenly had an idea. He couldn't afford those precious treasures, but could he not buy seeds? The success of the Three Suns fruit tree was in front of him, with the extraordinary yang liquid. As long as he had the right seeds, he could easily obtain spirit fruits. But seeds were really rare. That day in Black Wind trade, Kai Yang had wandered around for a long time, but he hadn't seen anyone selling seeds. This wasn't difficult to understand. To plant spirit grass and spirit tree seeds, not only did one need to find a suitable environment, one also needed to take care of them carefully, and it would take many years for them to bear fruit. Who would want to do that? If one had the time and energy, it would be better to cultivate. If no one wanted to buy, then no one would sell. If there was a demand, then there would be a market. Yang Kai said that he wanted to buy, and he wanted to buy a lot. Making up his mind, Yang Kai walked out of High Heaven Pavilion, all the way to Black Wind Trade. Although it was his second time here, Yang Kai seemed to be very familiar with the place. After more than half a month, the Black Wind trade market was still bustling with activity as usual. Cultivators came and went like carps crossing the river, innumerable. The stalls were filled with a dazzling array of rare treasures, making it too much for the eyes to take in. Walking around the lively stalls, he didn't find anyone selling seeds. Mentally prepared, Yang Kai wasn't disappointed. Following his memory, he went to the blood group's stall. He wanted to see if that guy had any extra seeds. Chapter 54. After walking for a while, a surprised shout came from the side. "Brother Yang!" Yang Kai looked over and saw Li Yun Tian waving at him with a face full of enthusiasm. There was also a stall in front of him. There were all kinds of things, some herbs and a few bottles. It looked like they were filled with pills. "Why are you setting up a stall here?" Yang Kai walked over and asked. He remembered that last time Sassafras had given them a death order to cultivate. "I just broke through. Young Master Su told me to come out and relax and stabilize my realm. It just so happens that the brothers need some things to help with their cultivation, so I came here to try my luck." Li Yun Tian explained. "So that's how it is." Carefully sizing up Li Yun Tian, Kai Yang discovered that compared to a few days ago, he was much stronger. He should have broken through to the tempered body 8th stage. "Brother, what are you doing here?" Li Yun Tian asked curiously. "I'm here to buy something." "What do you want?" "See if I have anything here. If you need it, just take it." Li Yun Tian pointed at the things on the stall and said generously, "Do you have the seeds of Yang attribute spirit herbs?" Li Yun Tian shook his head. "I don't have such things. As far as I know, there are very few people who sell seeds in this market. Generally speaking, seeds are not expensive, but they are still rare. I'm also here to try my luck." Yang Kai laughed. "How about this? I'll help brother put up a sign and see if I can get it. Since I'll be here for the next 2 days, if you're lucky, maybe someone will sell it." Li Yun Tian suggested. "All right, then I'll have to trouble Junior brother." Li Yun Tian picked up a sign and wrote a line of words, then put it on the side. After chatting with Li Yun Tian for a while, he knew that Sassafras and the others had suffered a big blow last time. With Su Yan's harsh words, this dandy young master finally restrained himself. These days he cultivated day and night and had already broken through to the initial element realm. After bidding farewell to Li Yun Tian, Yang Kai went all the way to the stall where he had bought the Yang Inflammation Stone. After seeing the familiar stall owner, Yang Kai couldn't help but sigh in relief. He was really afraid that he wouldn't be able to find him. "Hey, little brother, you're here again?" This disciple of the blood group had seen Yang Kai, and who may err together before, so he naturally had a deep impression of them. At this moment, he even used honorifics. "What do you want to buy this time?" The stall owner asked. "Do you still have the 3 Suns fruit seed that you gave me last time?" Yang Kai did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. The stall owner shook his head and said, "No, that's all I have. I've already given it to you as a bonus." I see. Yang Kai couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Then I'm sorry to disturb you. Finished speaking, Yang Kai walked to the side. He wanted to carefully look around the Black Wind trade market. With so many people selling things, if his luck was good, he should be able to find it. The blood group disciple looked at Yang Kai's back. He struggled for a moment, then suddenly shouted, "Little brother, please wait." Yang Kai turned his head and asked, "What's wrong?" In fact, the Three Sons fruit tree seed was not the only one. At that time, there were several seeds, but I only managed to get one seed. Listening to him, Yang Kai's expression was overjoyed. What about the other seeds? They were taken by several other people. If little brother really wants them, you can go find them. Where are they now? Yang Kai hurriedly asked. The stall owner looked hesitant. After a long while, he said, "They are in our group's mining area. They are mining the Yang inflammation stone and other minerals. But that area, even our group's disciples can't easily enter, let alone little brother, who is an outsider. When will they come out?" Yang Kai didn't want to give up. "I'm afraid they won't come out in a short time. If little brother wants to find them, you may have to wait 1 to 2 months. Yang Kai's eyebrows wrinkled. After such a long time, it would be too late to wait. "Do you have any way for me to go in and find them?" "Rest assured, I just want to buy the Three Sons fruit tree seed from them. I don't have a way. I'm just an ordinary member of the group." The stall owner shook his head with a wry smile. Then he rolled his eyes and said, "But someone has a way." Yang Kai was shocked. "I'd like to hear the details." The stall owner looked at him with a smile. His expression was somewhat ambiguous. "You can ask the little miss for help. With her leading you, the people in the mining area won't stop you." Ooh. After listening to this, Yang Kai's face became strange. He said, "My relationship with your little miss is ordinary." And the stall owner nodded again and again. It was obvious that he didn't believe Yang Kai's words. He pointed to a wooden house not far away and said, "Today is a coincidence. The little miss just happened to come to the trade market and is resting in that house. If you are in a hurry to get the seed, you might as well ask the little miss." Yang Kai was somewhat hesitant. Speaking of which, the matter between him and Hu Mei Er wasn't very pleasant. He had thoroughly offended this woman, and now he had to ask her for help. How could Yang Kai put down his face? But if he didn't ask her, then there was no other good way. Unwilling to give up, Yang Kai carefully searched the Black Wind trade market. Although he found some seeds, they weren't Yang attribute and were of no value to him. In desperation, Yang Kai clenched his teeth. Forget it, if he lost face, then he lost face. In any case, he didn't do anything wrong to her. Why should he be afraid of her? The wooden houses here were basically guarded by the experts of the 3 sections. Hu Mei Er was the daughter of the blood group's leader. Although her strength wasn't high, her status wasn't low. It was normal for her to rest in there. There was no one within 300 feet of the wooden houses. All the cultivators were very respectful to the experts in the wooden houses. Naturally, they wouldn't set up their stalls near the wooden houses. Arriving at the wooden house indicated by the stall owner, Yang Kai stood in front of the door. He didn't know how to open his mouth, but suddenly a delicate voice came from inside the house. "Who's outside?" It sounded like Hu Mei Er's voice, but it was also strange. Since he had already come here, Yang Kai naturally wouldn't back out. He immediately said, "Miss Hu Mei Er, I am Yang Kai. I hope you can come out and meet me." Contrary to Yang Kai's expectations, there were 2 women sitting in the room at the moment. The 2 of them looked almost the same. Even their demeanor and figure were the same. At first glance, one would think that there was a mirror here, and one of them was the reflection of the other. Hearing Yang Kai's voice, one of the women's beautiful eyes flashed with astonishment. Turning her head to look at the other woman, she said, "Little sister, is this the Yang Kai you were talking about?" The woman being asked was Hu Mei Er. Hearing the question, she nodded, and Why is he looking for me? She thought that after that day, the two of them would never cross paths again. The other woman sneered. It seems that he isn't the kind of man you were talking about who doesn't care about beauty. Some men, will pretend to be noble and virtuous. They will specifically lure a little girl like you into the trap. Then, they will seize the opportunity to capture your heart and soul, consigning you to eternal damnation. Hu Mei Er's face reddened. She angrily said, "Elder sister, he isn't what you think." Hu Jiao Er giggled. "If he isn't, why would he come looking for you after so many days? He must know that you can't forget about him. This time, he came to make his move." Hu Mei Er angrily said, "Elder sister, you always think the worst of people. If he really was that kind of person, then that day by the lake, Hu Mei Er believed that her chastity would have been at stake. No man could resist that kind of temptation." Chapter 55. But why did he come to look for her? Although Hu Mei Er didn't believe her sister's words, she still had some doubts in her heart. Seeing her expression, Hu Jiao Er faintly sighed. "If you persist in going about things the wrong way, you will suffer a big loss sooner or later." Hu Mei Er angrily said, "I won't talk to you anymore. He must have something important to tell me. I'm going to ask." Just as she was about to get up, she was held down by her sister. Hu Jiao Er's charming eyes turned, and she giggled. "Little sister, how about I make a bet with you?" "What bet?" Hu Mei Er's expression was puzzled. "Let's bet on whether or not he's a hypocrite. If he's really like you say, then he'll definitely be able to sit still. If he's not, then don't blame sister for being ruthless," Hu Jiao Er said, her eyes flashing with a cold light. All these years, Hu Mei Er stirred up trouble outside, but the reason why she was able to maintain her purity was mostly due to this sister of hers. Those who had bad intentions and wanted to use force on Hu Mei Er always died without knowing why. Towards her sister's methods, Hu Mei Er was very clear. Just by looking at her expression, she knew that she was definitely up to no good. "Sister, what do you want to do?" Hu Mei Er exclaimed. "Just watch carefully." "Humph!" Hu Jiao Er waved her hand, and a dense light suddenly enveloped her sister's body. Soon after, Hu Mei Er's body gradually dimmed and finally disappeared. "Sister, don't mess around." Hu Mei Er used all her strength to beat the air, but not a single sound came out. She couldn't even walk out of the 1-foot radius around her feet. She could only look at everything in the room and couldn't help but become anxious. Outside the door, Yang Kai waited for a long time, but didn't see Hu Mei Er open the door. He helplessly sighed. It seems that he really offended her that day, so it was natural for her to be angry. If it were any other woman, after being said those words, they probably wouldn't be able to remain calm. Forget it. Yang Kai originally didn't have any expectations. He only came here to try. Now that he saw that she wasn't willing to pay attention to him, he naturally couldn't force it. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Hu Mei Er's voice came from inside the room. "Come in." Yang Kai was stunned. After a moment of hesitation, he pushed the door open and walked in. After entering the house and closing the door, all the noise outside suddenly disappeared without a trace, leaving only a peaceful silence. Yang Kai looked around and found that the size of this wooden house was about the same as Su Yan's, but the furnishings inside were much better. Su Yan's house had nothing. It was just a simple wooden house, just as cold as her. But here there was a table, 2 chairs, and even a fragrant bed. The fragrant bed was hung with a pink curtain that was as thin as a cicada's wings. There was also a small pillow on the bed, and the room was filled with the delicate fragrance of a girl. This place and Su Yan's world were 2 completely different worlds. Hu Jiao Er sat at the table with a charming smile, facing the direction Yang Kai came in. Her charming eyes were tender and beautiful, staring at him with a strange expression. The corner of her mouth held a trace of an unknown smile, and her cheeks were blushing. It was very charming. Her two jade-like arms were exposed, and her pink skin was as white and translucent as a baby's. She wore a pair of wooden clogs, and her small and exquisite toes were exposed. It was unknown what was applied on her toenails, but they were purplish-red in color, and it revealed a wild charm. Yong Kai looked at her, and his heart jumped. He didn't know why, but Hu Mei-er seemed particularly charming today. Compared to the last time he saw her, she was much more charming, but her smile made Yong Kai feel awkward, thinking that the other party was ridiculing him. At this moment, Hu Mei-er's small and slender hand was holding a flat and round cloth fan, fanning herself in a graceful manner. The strands of her beautiful hair fluttered in the wind, adding a sense of indolence and nobility. The cloth fan's face was embroidered with a picture of a court lady. This court lady's figure was enchanting and full, posing in a seductive manner. If the clothes were less embroidered, it would be a set. Yong Kai glanced at it, thinking that this woman was really bold. If other women looked at it, they would be ashamed to death, but she dared to fan herself. She really wasn't an ordinary person. But after not seeing her for half a month, how did Hu Mei-er change so much? Although she kept staring at him, Yong Kai didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. While walking towards her, his eyes met hers without the slightest thought of retreating. That day, he saw Hu Mei-er's embarrassing state with his own eyes. It was equivalent to holding her little braids. Now that he was facing her again, how could Yong Kai be timid? Being stared at like this, Hu Jiao-er, who was pretending to be Hu Mei-er, felt a little overwhelmed. She thought that this person was really daring. Who would look at a beauty like this? He didn't know how to avoid her. He really didn't understand the situation. But his eyes were clear, without the slightest trace of obscenity. Arriving at the table, Yong Kai cupped his fist and said, "Miss Mei-er, after not seeing you for 10 days, you have become more and more charming." Hearing this, Hu Jiao-er giggled and said, "You also know how to flatter people." With regards to Yong Kai, Hu Mei-er had told her everything, so Hu Jiao-er knew how to respond and wasn't worried that she would give herself away. Yong Kai smiled. "I'm just speaking the truth." As he said this, he sat across from her. His heart was relieved. It seemed that this woman wasn't angry with him. This made things much easier. "Miss Mei-er, this time I came—" Yong Kai planned to directly state his purpose. This way, he would appear more sincere. "Let's not talk about this first." Hu Jiao-er put down her cloth fan. She stood up and picked up the teapot on the table. Walking to Yong Kai's side, she poured him a cup and said, "It's hot outside. Drink some tea to moisten your throat. It won't be too late to talk after a while." "That's fine, too." Yong Kai nodded. Enjoying the other's warmth, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. Suddenly, his expression became a little strange. Hu Jiao-er returned to her seat and sat down, holding her cheeks with both hands. She calmly looked at him and said, "Junior brother Yong, what do you think of this tea?" Yong Kai's mind was thinking about other things. He raised his eyes and looked at Hu Jiao-er meaningfully, then said, "The leaves of this tea are flat like a palm, slender and straight. The color is like a drop of jade, and the bottom of the leaves is dense with flowers. It is a top-quality product." Hu Jiao-er was stunned. Full of surprise, she looked at Yong Kai and asked, "You know?" Even she didn't know, she just drank it. She didn't think that Yong Kai would be able to explain it so clearly. How could she not be surprised? Yong Kai shook his head. "I know a little, not proficient." "Then what do you think of this tea compared to mine?" Hu Jiao-er looked at Yong Kai, her breath like orchids. Even though they were separated by a table, Yong Kai could feel the other's breath. It was as sweet as a mountain stream, as clear as 100-year-old wine, leaving a rich aftertaste. Without any reason, Yong Kai suddenly felt his breath quicken. His blood slowly surged, and he almost blurted out, "The tea is better for a good person." He. Hu Jiao-er giggled, her chest trembling. Yang Kai's eyes stared at those huge, full breasts. His Adam's apple couldn't help but move. Hu Jiao Air intentionally or unintentionally picked up the cloth fan, blocking the spring scenery in front of her chest. However, she deliberately turned the picture of the scantily clad lady towards him. Yang Kai's face suddenly turned red. Chapter 56. Seeing this scene, the imprisoned Hume heir immediately shouted, "Elder sister, you're shameless." But how could her cries be heard? She was so anxious that her fragrant sweat was dripping, but there was nothing she could do. This was too despicable. With her elder sister's strength, it was easy for her to toy with a tempered body cultivator. If it was a normal conversation, Hume Air felt that Yang Kai would definitely not reveal any embarrassment. But if her elder sister secretly used some tricks, then it was hard to say. Inside the room, Hu Jiao Air suddenly stood up and walked step by step towards the fragrant bed. Looking back, she smiled and said, "Wait a moment, I'll get something for you." "Okay." Yang Kai frowned. He faintly felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. Walking to the side of the fragrant bed, Hu Jiao Air bent down and half knelt on the bed to search. Her thin clothes couldn't hide her 10,000 kinds of flirtatious feelings. The clothes that clung to her body wrapped around her perfectly round and perky buttocks, displaying an incomparable temptation. Yang Kai's heartbeat sped up a lot, and his throat burned. For a long time, Hu Jiao Air still maintained this seductive posture. Suddenly, a delicate cry came from her mouth. "What's wrong?" Yang Kai's expression changed, and he hurriedly rushed forward. At this time, Hu Jiao Air retreated from the bed. Her footsteps staggered, and she directly fell into Yang Kai's arms, hugging him tightly. The two people's feet bumped into each other, and for some reason, they both fell on the bed. Hu Jiao Air was on top, and Yang Kai was on the bottom. Her hot and delicate body was in his arms. Yang Kai's throat became more and more dry. Looking at the beautiful face and tender lips in front of him, Yang Kai suppressed the desire in his heart and opened his mouth to ask, "What's wrong?" "There's a bug." Hu Jiao Air's acting was quite good. Her two small hands grabbed onto Yang Kai's clothes and didn't let go, looking like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. Yang Kai laughed involuntarily. There, following the direction Hu Jiao Air pointed, Yang Kai saw a worm slowly crawling there. He thought to himself, "This woman is really interesting. She's already a cultivator, yet a mere worm can scare her like this." He reached out his hand and pinched it to death. Then he patted Hu Jiao Air's shoulder and said, "It's okay. I've already killed it. There must be more." Hu Jiao Air continued to speak as she turned her head to look around. Strands of her hair swept across Yang Kai's cheeks and mouth. Yang Kai's mood, which had just calmed down, was once again aroused. No more. Yang Kai felt that this wasn't a good idea. If someone were to barge in and see him and who may err in this state, then they wouldn't be able to clear their name. Is there really nothing else? Hu Jiao Air's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. She didn't think that Yang Kai would actually be able to sit still and not take advantage of her. Just now, if Yang Kai really did make a move, then the result would definitely be a broken arm or a broken leg. Although her heart was unhappy, Hu Jiao Air didn't insist. Instead, she meekly climbed up from Yang Kai's body. Yang Kai also sat up. He somewhat embarrassedly raised his head to look at Hume Air. He discovered that the other party's face was also red as she limped to sit beside him. "What's wrong with your foot?" Yang Kai asked. "When I fell just now, I think I sprained it." Hu Jiao Air's first plan didn't work, so she came up with another one. She thought to herself, "I'll make a sacrifice today and dig out your heart to see if it's black or red. Let me see." Yang Kai squatted down and picked up Hu Jiao Air's foot to examine it. He discovered that her ankle was indeed a bit red and swollen. It was clearly a sprain, but it wasn't a real injury. In order to test Yang Kai, Hu Jiao Air sacrificed a lot this time. Yang Kai didn't avoid anything. After all, Hu Mei Air wasn't someone who cared too much about etiquette. Before, she had seduced him. So what if he took her foot now? Don't move. Yang Kai warned. Then he reached into his bosom and took out a bottle of pills. This was a bottle of Sky Tower's blood coagulation cream. After taking it out, Yang Kai's movements paused, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he opened the bottle and poured out some of the cream, spreading it out in his palm. He carefully applied it to the red and swollen area of Hu Jiaoer's foot. The weak true Yang Yuan Qi was also circulating, helping to dissolve the effects of the medicine. Hu Jiaoer couldn't help but tremble. She secretly thought that this time, she really suffered a big loss. For so many years, her pure and clean body had never been touched by anyone. Today, in order to make a bet with her little sister, she had been hugged and touched by someone. Unfortunately, she couldn't get angry, and she couldn't let the other party take responsibility. Although she felt wronged in her heart, her body had a different feeling. That big hand gently rubbed her ankle. His expression was serious, and his movements were gentle. His rough hand rubbed against her tender skin, bringing a burst of numbness. When he was serious, he seemed to have a kind of calmness that didn't match his age. Following Yang Kai's movements, Hu Jiaoer's wild thoughts were gradually interrupted. Her body constantly surged with a strange feeling. This feeling made her flustered. Her maiden heart suddenly began to beat wildly. Her lower abdomen also had a hot current like lightning jumping up and down. She couldn't help but clamp her legs together. She was afraid that if she didn't clamp her legs together, that hot current would rush out. Yang Kai. A strange voice came out from Hu Jiaoer's mouth. At this moment, she was so embarrassed that she couldn't show her face. She never thought that she would one day make such a sound. And Yang Kai raised his head and saw Hu Jiaoer's pair of watery eyes staring at him. There was no other color on her face, only a red flush. Do you want to do something else? Hu Jiaoer bit her ruby red lips and made a final counterattack. If Yang Kai agreed, she could abandon all of her current feelings and completely withdraw. Moreover, she wouldn't let Yang Kai have an easy time. Would he agree? Hu Jiaoer was nervous. She hoped that he would agree and release her, but she also hoped that he would refuse. This proved that her little sister didn't make a mistake, and she also didn't make a mistake. This kind of tension and struggle made her heart very hesitant. Hu Jiaoer was worried, but how could the imprisoned Hu Mei not be worried? At this moment, she also stopped her useless shouts and stared closely at Yang Kai. She didn't know what kind of answer he would give. Kai Yang stared straight at Hu Jiaoer, seemingly interested in her. Hu Jiaoer's heart leapt to her throat, afraid that Kai Yang would say yes. Suddenly, Kai Yang smiled faintly and slowly put away the blood-clotting cream. Solemnly, he put it into his pocket. "Miss," Yang Kai muttered, and Hu Jiaoer was so nervous that she didn't notice the change in the way Yang Kai addressed her. "The blood coagulation cream that I just gave you is one of my most precious things. Although its value is not high, it is a testimony to the warmth I have felt in these past few years." "What do you mean?" Hu Jiaoer was stunned. She asked him whether he wanted it or not. Why did he say this to her? What was the deeper meaning? Yang Kai straightened up and looked down at Hu Jiaoer. "I wanted to tell you that I used this precious ointment to heal your wounds. I hope you won't mind my previous offense. This farce ends here." Chapter 57. What are you talking about? Hu Jiaoer's expression changed as she forced a smile. "I don't understand. Could it be that he found out that she wasn't her sister? Impossible. He was clearly only at the 9th level of the tempered body stage. How could he see through her? A dignified Yuan Qi cultivator's trick. What's more, she and her sister looked the same. No matter if it was their voice or form, there was no difference. The elders in the sect often mistook their identities. So how could he have this ability? Yong Kai looked at her indifferently and chuckled. Miss, are you saying that you don't want to admit it? Admit what? I really don't know what you're talking about. Hu Jiao Air made a final effort. Yong Kai rubbed his forehead and said helplessly, Then I'll make it clear. Miss, you're not Hu Mei Air. I think you should be her twin sister. Hu Jiao Air was stunned and immediately laughed. Why do you say that? This time, she didn't try to deny it. Instead, she looked at Kai Yang with great interest. She also wanted to know where she had exposed herself. If Kai Yang couldn't tell her the truth, then it was clear that he was just using words to trick her. Maybe he was just suspicious and didn't dare to be sure, so he wanted her to admit it. Hu Jiao Air guessed in her heart. Miss, you're testing my eyesight. Yong Kai wasn't angry and chuckled. He turned and walked to the table and picked up the teacup he was drinking from. He took a sip and said, Actually, I wasn't sure if you were Hu Mei Air, but now I can be sure. You're not her. Hu Jiao Air was stunned, but she gnashed her teeth in hatred. So what he said just now was really just a test. I'm so angry. I'm a Yuan Qi cultivator, but I was careless and fell for a tempered body stage brat's trick. This is really capsizing and losing face. There was no point in continuing to deny it, so Hu Jiao Air giggled and sat sideways on the bed, her enchanting figure faintly discernible. Looking at Yong Kai with her beautiful eyes, she asked in a soft voice, When did you start suspecting me? When we drink tea. Yong Kai knocked on the teacup in his hand. Although the tea is pleasant, it can't cover up the woman's fragrance on the cup. And there's a faint lipstick mark on the rim of the cup. I think this teacup was used not long ago, right? And that person is Miss Hu Mei Air. Just based on this, you think I'm not Mei Air? Hu Jiao Air was stunned. Of course not. Yong Kai shook his head slowly. The second thing that made me suspicious was your temperament. I don't think it's possible for a woman's temperament to change so drastically in just a few days. To give you a compliment, Miss Mei Er's charm is slightly immature, but your charm is completely natural. I like those words. Hu Jiao Air covered her mouth and giggled. Continue. Is there anything else? Thirdly, your body fragrance is extremely similar to Miss Mei Er's. However, if you carefully taste it, there are some differences. Her fragrance is sweet, while yours is slightly more elegant. Stinking brat. Hu Jiao Air's face turned pink. Yong Kai's explicit words made it difficult for her to control herself. Thinking of the sacrifice she made to test him, Hu Jiao Air couldn't help but want to slap this man in front of her into a meat patty. Fourthly, Yong Kai ignored Hu Jiao Air's murderous gaze and continued, There's more. Hu Jiao Air was shocked. She didn't think that this stinking brat, who was only a tempered body cultivator, would be able to see through so many flaws. Originally, she thought that her plan was flawless. Fourthly, the injury on your foot. That injury looks like a sprain, but in fact, it's caused by the internal shock from your own cultivation. This is the biggest mistake. Although Miss Mei Air is a young girl, she is still a cultivator. How could it be so easy for her to sprain her own foot? That was my oversight. Hu Jiao Air nodded lightly. At that time, she was only thinking about how to trick Yong Kai, but didn't think so far ahead. Raising her head, she saw that Yong Kai was still deep in thought. Hu Jiao Air couldn't help but say, Don't tell me that you still saw through my plan. Hu Jiao Air was not convinced. How could a plan that she thought was perfect be full of flaws when it came to him? His analysis was clear and logical, making it impossible for others to refute. This stinking brat is really annoying. If he dares to say that there are any flaws, this great aunt will definitely teach him a lesson. He doesn't know how to look at other people's faces. Then don't say it. Yong Kai frowned. Hearing him say this, Hu Jiao Air was not happy. Her beautiful eyes were cold, and she smiled sweetly. Clenching her teeth, she said, Say it. I won't say it. Yang Kai shook his head. Hu Jiao Air said angrily. I told you to say it. So just say it. How can you keep people in suspense like this? Yang Kai smiled bitterly. I'm afraid that if I say it, it will make you angry. Hu Jiao Air's phoenix eyes narrowed. Make me angry? Then it must be something bad. And then all the more I want to hear it. But you have to promise that you won't be angry. If you don't say it, how will I know if I won't be angry? Then forget about it. Don't you know that when you have a dispute with a woman, you should take a step back? Hu Jiao Air was full of hatred. This brat looked smart, but in fact he was a hothead. If I take a step back, I will be hurt. I think I can't beat you. Yang Kai said seriously. At least you are a little tactful. Hu Jiao Air smiled proudly. Her body rolled up like a gust of wind. She walked from the bed to the table and sat down, looking at Yang Kai. She pondered for a moment and said, Okay, I promise I won't be angry with you, and promise you won't hit me. Okay. Hu Jiao Air gritted her teeth and said, Tell me, what is the last flaw? Yang Kai said seriously, Actually, it's not a flaw. It's just that you and Mei look different. What's the difference? Hu Jiao Air asked curiously. She and her little sister were carved from the same mold. How could there be any difference? Yang Kai smacked his lips and hesitated for a long time. Then he said, Your butt, one side is big and the other is small. It's not as well proportioned as Mei Er's. When this sentence came out, Hu Jiao Air's face turned red. Her Yuan Qi fiercely erupted, and the room was suddenly filled with a whistling wind. Remember the promise you just made. Yang Kai's expression didn't change, and his heart didn't skip a beat, lightly reminding him. Hu Jiao Air's astonishing aura suddenly shrank. She was so angry that her whole body trembled, but she couldn't do anything. She clenched her teeth so hard that they almost broke. After a long time, she angrily slammed the table and shouted, Bullshit! For a girl to burst out with such vulgar words. One could imagine how angry Hu Jiao Air was. This stinking brat should be hacked into pieces. He actually said that one side of her, but was big, and the other side was small. Was this something a man should say? How was one side big and one side small? It was clearly very well proportioned, okay? Stinking brat. I'm afraid you don't know how to write the word death. Chapter 58. Knowing that Hu Jiao Air was angry, Yang Kai quickly comforted her. Miss, you don't have to worry about it. In fact, if you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't be able to see it. Hu Jiao Air's face turned cold as she looked at Yang Kai with a murderous look. In other words, you just looked carefully? Yang Kai couldn't help but cough a few times and said with some embarrassment, Yes, I looked a few more times. You can't blame me. You were the one who stuck out your butt towards me. Do you think I didn't see it? Yang Kai felt wronged in his heart. With these doubts, if I still couldn't see that Miss and Hu Mei were two different people, then I would have wasted my pair of eyes. Yang Kai smiled faintly. After Hu Jiao Air's anger, she carefully thought about it and couldn't help but be shocked. She found that this man named Yang Kai had unparalleled insight. From entering the room to exposing her, it only took half a cup of tea's time for him to see so many suspicious points. This kind of ability wasn't something that everyone had. Moreover, she had personally tried to seduce him, but he didn't succeed. This person's willpower and character were also quite good. He wouldn't be moved by beauty. He was a man with a strong heart. A person. Although he was young and his strength was weak, it couldn't be denied that he was a person. Thinking of this, Hu Jiao Air rolled her eyes and winked at Yang Kai. Yang Kai, right? In view of the fact that you just offended me, now this miss will give you two choices. What choices? Yang Kai asked. The first choice, whichever hand that touched me, that hand will be cut off. Whichever eye that looked at me, that eye will be gouged out. If so, I will forgive you for your previous offense. Hu Jiao said these words with a smile on her face. Her tone was gentle, as if she was a wife whispering to her husband, but there was an inhumane cruelty and bloodthirstiness in her words. Yang Kai shook his head. I'll listen to the second choice. Smart. Hu Jiao smiled. The second option is to leave High Heaven Pavilion and join my blood group. I will report to my father and let him give you the position of squad leader. As far as I know, in High Heaven Pavilion, you're just a trial disciple of the lowest level, bullied and humiliated, and you don't have any good cultivation resources. But if you come to Blood Group, you'll be treated 100 times better than in High Heaven Pavilion. How about it? Aren't my conditions generous? Is there any other choice? No more. Then I won't choose any of them. Yang Kai secretly circulated his true young secret art as he vigilantly looked at Hu Jiao. You want to force me to make a move? Hu Jiao sneered. I don't think the young lady will really fight. This is not the blood group. Once the slightest trace of a battle is spread out, the High Heaven Pavilion's disciples will also come to investigate. At that time, the young lady will also be in trouble. A trivial trial disciple. If I kill him, then I kill him. What can High Heaven Pavilion do to me? At most, I'll just go with some things. I'm sure they won't care if you live or die. If the young lady really wanted to kill me, then you wouldn't have talked so much nonsense with me. Yang Kai looked calm and composed, but in fact, he was nervous. After all, a woman's heart was like a needle in the ocean. Who knows what she was thinking in the end? He now regretted speaking the truth. A woman's words really couldn't be trusted, especially a beautiful woman. His experience was still too little. Moreover, I have already said that I will use my most precious blood coagulation cream to heal your wounds, so please don't mind me offending you again. Kai Yang tried to persuade her with reason and with emotion. A bottle of blood coagulation cream is enough to compensate for my loss. To me, Hu Jiao was angry. She wanted to say that he had already hugged her, touched her, but when the words reached her mouth, she couldn't say it. Her loss was too big. How could a bottle of medicine make up for it? If you want to say it like that, then I can't do anything. In fact, you know what happened just now? You were the one who took the initiative. These words were like adding oil to the fire. Hu Jiao was ashamed and angry. Just as she was about to hit him, she turned her head and looked at the place where Hu Mei was imprisoned. Seeing Hu Mei anxiously shouting from inside, she couldn't help but soften. Her anger gradually dissipated. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Forget it, this time I won't argue with you." Yang Kai couldn't help but let out a long breath. "Young lady, please forgive me." Hu Jiao chuckled. "Actually, what you just said was correct, but you were wrong about one thing." "What is it?" Yang Kai asked. Hu Jiao didn't immediately answer. Instead, she waved her hand, and the imprisoned Hu Mei gradually appeared. Yang Kai was shocked. Although he knew that this woman's strength was very high, he didn't expect it to be to this extent. With a wave of her hand, a person quietly appeared. This was clearly something that an expert of Yuan-Chi realm or higher could do. Hu Mei was freed. Her beautiful eyes glanced at Yang Kai, and her face relaxed. Just now, she was really nervous to death. She was afraid that her sister would kill Yang Kai in a fit of anger. Looking at her sister again, Hu Mei couldn't help but laugh. She remembered the words that Yang Kai just said. Heavens, there was actually a man in this world who dared to say such things to her sister. Moreover, after saying it, he was actually unharmed. "Sister." As soon as Hu Mei came out, she threw herself at Hu Jiao's side and acted like a spoiled child. "Don't be angry. This time you can't blame him." "I didn't say that I blame him." Hu Jiao was still angry. She turned her head and looked at Yang Kai. "I said that you were wrong about one thing, and that is that Hu Mei and I are not twins." "Not twins?" Yang Kai was surprised. Looking carefully, the two women in front of him were exactly the same. There was no difference. If Yang Kai were to identify them the next time they met, he definitely wouldn't be able to tell who was who. No, I am a few years older than Hu Mei Er. Hu Jiao Er smiled slightly. Seeing Yang Kai's surprised expression, she couldn't help but feel a little better. Sure enough, this is a boundless world. Nothing is too strange. Yang Kai sighed. Although they were sisters, they were born a few years apart, and yet they could grow up to such an extent. In this world, they were probably the only ones. You don't know me? Hu Jiao Er was slightly puzzled. She was one of the younger generation of the blood group. Her reputation was illustrious. How could this person not know her? I don't know. Yang Kai shook his head. He seemed to be very ignorant and inexperienced. Seeing that he didn't seem to be lying, Hu Jiao Er could only believe him. Naturally, she didn't know what Yang Kai had been through these past few years. He was practically isolated from the world and never communicated with others. Why are you looking for me today? Hu Mei Er turned her head and looked at Yang Kai. Yang Kai told her the purpose of this trip. Hu Mei Er looked at her sister and asked for her opinion. The latter waved her hand and said, "Go, but don't cause trouble in the mine." "Thank you." Yang Kai couldn't help but sigh in relief. "Let's go. I will take you there. The mine is not very far from here." Hu Mei Er seemed to be in a good mood. Her face was radiant as she led the way. After Yang Kai and Hu Mei Er left, Hu Jiao Er slowly got up. Her two jade hands stroked her round buttocks. After a while, she muttered to herself, "How is one side bigger and one side smaller? They are clearly the same. This stinking brat is spouting nonsense. He's too despicable." Chapter 59. Leaving the bustling Black Wind trade. Under Hu Mei Er's lead, the two of them headed north of Black Wind Forest. Hu Mei Er seemed to be somewhat happy, her pair of charming eyes filled with joy, her cheeks flushed red. About that day, "I'm sorry." Yang Kai suddenly apologized. The words he said that day were indeed a bit too much, and now he came to ask for help. It was a bit of a double-edged sword. Hu Mei Er pursed her lips and smiled. "It's okay, you didn't scold me. These past few years I've heard worse words, but didn't I still survive?" "You don't hate me?" Yang Kai was surprised. "Why would I hate you?" Hu Mei Er smiled and suddenly said, "Actually, I did hate you, but one of your actions made me unable to hate you." "What actions?" "Ha ha. That day when Cheng Xiaofeng and Nu Tao suddenly appeared, you stood in front of me. Maybe it was an unconscious action, but it was the first time in these past few years that someone sincerely wanted to protect me. I don't remember, but it wasn't easy for you." Yang Kai sighed. A good girl actually willingly destroyed her own reputation just to help the blood group find more men. Although her intentions were not good, it was still a filial piety. "Ha ha." Hu Mei Er laughed. "It wasn't easy. Don't you know that acting is a woman's instinct?" "Ha ha. I haven't had much contact with women." "Really?" Hu Mei Er's eyes lit up. "And so these past few days I've been taken advantage of by you two sisters," Yang Kai said in a deadpan manner. Hu Mei Er glanced at him angrily. "You're so mean. Luckily my sister wasn't here. If she was, I'll definitely beat you up." "Your sister?" "Yuan Qi Realm, first level," Hu Mei Er replied with some pride. "Amazing," Yang Kai praised. Su Yan was Yuan Qi Realm third level. Hu Mei Er's sister was a bit weaker than Su Yan, but not by much. When Hu Mei Er mentioned her older sister, she remembered what Yang Kai had said. For a moment, she was convulsing with laughter, unable to close her mouth. Yang Kai was speechless. He could only stand there and wait for her to catch her breath. After laughing for a long while, Hu Mei Er gradually regained her breath. With a smile on her face, she said, "I've discovered that you're quite daring. There has never been a man who dared to say that to Big Sister. That part of her, is it true that one side is bigger than the other?" "Maybe it's because of the clothes she's wearing." Tell her not to worry about it later. Yang Kai chuckled. What about mine? Are they really well proportioned? Hu Mei Er's face was bashful as she boldly asked, Not only is it well proportioned, but it's also round and perky. Yang Kai nodded. You have a good figure, so you don't have to undervalue yourself. Hu Mei Er immediately felt a little overwhelmed. This kind of straightforward praise without any ulterior motives was probably the best thing she had heard in all these years. For a moment, he was secretly delighted. How long before we arrive? Yang Kai didn't want to delve into this topic, so he opened his mouth and asked, We still have to walk for an hour. Although that place can be considered as Black Wind Forest, it is already the center of Black Wind Forest. Hu Mei Er explained, there is an underground mineral vein that was discovered by our blood group a few years ago. Since then, we have stationed people there to mine it. The things produced there are very strange. How strange? Yang Kai asked. There are only 2 types of stones there. One is the Yang inflammation stone that you bought, and the other is the Yin Yuan stone. Don't you think it's strange? These 2 types of stones are opposite to each other, but they can be produced together in that mineral vein. I don't know what is going on. This is really strange. Yang Kai was slightly moved. The Yang inflammation stone contains Yang energy, while the Yin Yuan stone contains Yin energy. They are opposite attributes. Under normal circumstances, it is absolutely impossible for them to be produced together. The experts of the gang also feel that there is something wrong with the mine, but after investigating and mining for several years, they didn't find anything special. However, because of this mine, our gang has earned a lot of money. Hu Mei Er didn't seem to treat Yang Kai as an outsider, so she said what she thought. This is your blood group's good fortune. Yang Kai smiled slightly. Hu Mei Er hummed and suddenly became silent. After walking for a while, she opened her mouth and said, Actually, today can be considered a coincidence. If you missed today, even if you wanted to find me, you wouldn't be able to find me. This is also your good fortune. Where are you going? Yang Kai understood the meaning behind her words. I'm not going anywhere. Hu Mei Er shook her head. While explaining, she secretly looked at Yang Kai's expression. After being lectured by you last time, I suddenly felt that my methods these past few years were wrong. Relying on those despicable methods to win people over, they don't care about blood group, but me. I can't give them what they want, so naturally they won't really work for the gang. Therefore, I decided to go into seclusion to cultivate. When I am strong, I can also share the burden of father, just like sister. You can think like this. It is a good thing. Yang Kai nodded. Hu Mei Er's expression couldn't help but be disappointed. She found that Yang Kai's expression was very calm from beginning to end, and didn't have any mood swings because of her words. Feeling slightly bitter, Hu Mei Er didn't have the mood to talk, and only continued to lead the way. Since she didn't speak, Yang Kai naturally wouldn't say anything. After walking for more than an hour, the 2 of them arrived at the blood group's mine. This was the center of Black Wind Forest, and in front of them was the blood group's mine. On the ground, there were some houses for the disciples to live and rest. Because the ore vein was underground when Yang Kai and Hu Mei Er arrived, they didn't see the mine as lively. Only the ground had a large hole that led directly to the ground. Even from 1,000 feet away, Kai Yang could feel the Yang origin seal on his chest giving off a strong reaction. It was the reaction of the underground bright Yang stone. With the growth of his strength, the range of Yang Qi that the Yang inflammation stone could sense also increased, but the increase was not too much. The arrival of the 2 of them attracted the attention of the blood group's disciples on the ground. An old man suddenly descended from the sky and blocked in front of Yang Kai and Hu Mei Er. He cupped his fist and said, Miss. Grandpa Long, Hu Mei Er affectionately called out and pulled Yang Kai to introduce him. This is our gang's vice leader, Grandpa Long Zaitian. Yang Kai hurriedly saluted. Greetings, Senior Long. Long Zai Tian looked at Yang Kai with contempt and didn't pay attention to him. With his immortal ascension boundary strength and blood group's vice leader's position, why would he need to pay attention to Yang Kai, this small trash, another gigolo who lived off a woman? Long Zai Tian especially despised people like Yang Kai. If it weren't for Hu Mei Er's face, he would have directly slapped Yang Kai to death. "Miss, what are you doing in the mine?" Long Zai Tian stroked his white beard and asked kindly, "This place is dirty and hot. It's not a place you can come. Quickly go back, or else your father will scold me." "No, father, I don't dare to scold you. You are a senior member of the gang for 3 generations. Father will only respect you." Hu Mei Er acted like a spoiled child. Long Zai Tian's face immediately showed an expression of enjoyment. "Grandpa Long, my friend came to the mine to find a few disciples to buy some things. Can you give us some convenience and let us in?" Hu Mei Er said. To be continued. Chapter 60. Enter the mine. Long Zai Tian's face instantly fell as he vigilantly sized up Yang Kai and said, "He's not a disciple of the faction, right?" Yang Kai stepped forward and respectfully said, "I am a disciple of Sky Tower Pavilion. It's not that the faction's disciples aren't allowed to enter." Long Zai Tian angrily glared at him and said with disdain, "Even the faction's disciples can't casually enter the mine, let alone an outsider like you." After he finished speaking, he bitterly turned his head to look at Hu Mei Er and said, "Miss, how can you bring an outsider here? You're young and don't know the ways of the world. As the saying goes, it's hard to tell what's in a person's heart. You may know a person's face, but not his heart. These past few years, because of this mine, our faction has earned a lot of money. Many people have been eyeing us with jealousy, especially those small fries who are trying to find out information about the mine. If it weren't for this old man overseeing this place all year round, who knows what kind of trouble would occur?" Yang Kai's face sank. This old man was pointing at the mulberry and cursing the locust tree. Hu Mei Er sensed Yang Kai's unhappiness and quickly said, "Grandpa Long, you've misunderstood. He didn't want to find out anything. He just wanted to buy something." Long Zai Tian sneered. "Buy something? How can you buy something here? This excuse is really interesting. Little brat, I don't care what your purpose is. Scram for this old man. If you dare to appear here again, this old man won't be able to kill you." Yang Kai's stomach was filled with anger. This old man was too self-righteous. Although he was angry, Yang Kai knew that the difference in strength between them was too big. If they really fought, this old man would probably blow him to death with a single breath. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Yang Kai didn't say anything. If he were to clash with him now, the one who would suffer would be him. Coward! Long Zai Tian looked at Yang Kai and despised him even more. The true Yang Yuan Qi in Yang Kai's body uncontrollably surged as he angrily glared at Long Zai Tian. Sensing the change in the Yuan Qi in Yang Kai's body, Long Zai Tian flew into a rage. "Impudent! You want to fight me?" Then, for no reason at all, disregarding the difference in strength and seniority, he sent a palm strike towards Yang Kai. With this palm strike, Yang Kai found that he suddenly couldn't move. He could only stand there in a daze. This wasn't because he was scared, but because his opponent had used some kind of method to imprison him. Yang Kai's expression greatly changed. He really didn't think that this old guy would actually be so shameless. He could feel Long Zai Tian's attitude towards him, but he couldn't understand why. Now that he suddenly wanted to kill him, Yang Kai was truly shocked to the point that his soul almost left his body. With the aura of death looming over him, the enormous pressure brought about by this immortal ascension boundary master caused Yang Kai's heartbeat to stop at this moment, and his breathing became even more labored. In this desperate situation, a strong will to survive spread throughout his body. Suddenly, a scalding heat spread out from his bones and quickly spread out. In the next moment, Yang Kai found that the power that was imprisoning him suddenly disappeared. In a hurry, Yang Kai used all the strength in his body and fiercely dodged to the side. Long Zai-Tian casually sent out a palm strike. He thought that this high heaven pavilion disciple would directly die under his palm, but what he didn't expect was that his opponent actually dodged. How is this possible? Long Zai-Tian frowned. How could an immortal Ascension Boundary Master's imprisonment be broken by him? Because he didn't think of this point, Long Zai-Tian's casual palm strike didn't work. Although Long Zai-Tian's attack didn't hit Yang Kai, it still made him extremely embarrassed. His face instantly paled, and his whole body was dripping with sweat. When he stood firm and looked at Long Zai-Tian again, Yang Kai's eyes had a cold expression. If it was said that Yang Kai was just angry at Long Zai-Tian's attitude towards him before, then now it was a deep hatred. The opponent didn't hide his intention to take his life, as if he wanted to casually pinch an ant to death. Long Zai-Tian naturally understood this point, although he didn't know why his imprisonment just now lost its effect, since he already had the intention to kill Yang Kai. How could he easily stop? In for a penny, in for a pound, he sent out another palm strike. At this time, Hu Mei-er woke up from her stupor and quickly dodged in front of Yang Kai. Glaring at Long Zai-Tian, she hissed, "Grandpa Long, he's my friend. What do you want to do?" Those who attempt to inquire about the mining area will be killed without exception. This is the sect leader's order. Long Zai-Tian deeply looked at Hu Mei-er, a trace of astonishment flashing through his eyes. In the past, Hu Mei-er had also frequently interacted with young men, but he had never seen her so desperately protect anyone. Towards the life or death of those young men, Hu Mei-er never cared. In other words, 8 out of 10 men who were provoked by her didn't have a good ending. But this time, she bravely stood in front of this high heaven pavilion disciple and even used a fierce tone to question him. This was something that had never happened before. Long Zai-Tian's eyes narrowed, as if he was deep in thought, his killing intent becoming even stronger. Hu Mei-er blocked Yang Kai behind her, gnashing her teeth as she glared at Long Zai-Tian, saying, "I already said, my friend only came to buy some things, not to inquire about the mining area. Grandpa Long, do you not believe my words?" Seeing Hu Mei-er protect Yang Kai so strongly, Long Zai-Tian couldn't continue to pester her endlessly, and could only say, "I don't dare." Young Miss Words, this old man still believes them. Since that's the case, why do you still want to do this? This old man knows his wrongs, and hopes young Miss will forgive him. Blood Group was different from Stormhouse and High Heaven Pavilion. This was a family power, and the Hu family was the master, so even if Long Zai-Tian was the vice leader, he still had to give Hu Mei-er some face. But this old man still asks young Miss to forgive him. The mining area is a big matter. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. After Long Zai-Tian finished speaking, he no longer paid attention to Hu Mei-er, looked at Yang Kai, and coldly snorted before turning to leave. Yang Kai took a deep breath and calmed the boiling blood in his chest, saying, "Old sir, please wait." Long Zai-Tian impatiently turned his head, narrowing his eyes as he looked at Yang Kai, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Old sir, the current me is not your opponent." Yang Kai slowly walked in front of Hu Mei-er, looking at Long Zai-Tian without fear. "So today's humiliation, I will bear it. But 5 years later, 10 years later, I will return this debt. I hope old sir can live until then." Yang Kai said very calmly but very seriously. Long Zai-Tian's expression turned cold and immediately laughed. "Whether or not this old man can live until then, you don't need to worry, but I think you are destined to not live until then. Arrogant brat, be careful in the future." "I will." Long Zai-Tian left, and Hu Mei-er looked at Yang Kai apologetically, repeatedly apologizing. I'm sorry, I didn't know why Grandpa Long was like this. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have brought you here." "It's fine. Taking a deep breath, Kai Yang recalled the thrilling scene from a moment ago. He still had some lingering fear in his heart. If it wasn't for the unyielding golden skeleton at that critical moment, he feared that he would have already died. It was because of that boiling heat that he was able to break free from Long Zai Tian's imprisonment and escape death. Chapter 61. Why would Long Zai Tian target him? Yang Kai glanced at Hu Mei-er, whose eyes were full of regret and guilt. His heart faintly understood. Some things were not necessary to ask. Hu Mei-er was also an intelligent and quick-witted girl. Although Kai Yang had only glanced at her once, she was able to understand what he meant. Grandpa Long did not allow you to enter the mine. I also did not want to give him face. How about this? I will help you buy those seeds. You wait for me here for a while. Hu Mei-er said softly. Okay. Kai Yang knew that this was the only thing he could do, so he took out all of his valuables and told Hu Mei-er the names of the blood group disciples who had picked up the seedlings. He had already inquired about this matter from the stall owner in Black Wind Trade. Hu Mei-er entered the underground mine. Yang Kai's eyes swept the several rooms above ground. Long Zai Tian had entered one of the rooms. He could feel that there was a pair of eyes staring at him. Inside the room, an old man and a young man were standing by the window looking at Yang Kai's direction. The old man was Long Zai Tian, who had just attacked Yang Kai. The young man was about the same age as Yang Kai. He was Long Zai Tian's grandson, Long Hui. Long Hui coldly looked at Yang Kai. He said with some dissatisfaction, Grandpa, why didn't you kill him? Long Zai Tian coldly snorted. Mei-er is protecting him. How do you want me to kill him? That's even more reason to kill him. I have never seen Sister Mei-er so attentive to a man. This brat and Mei-er's relationship is not bad. Leaving him alive is definitely a disaster. And I have never seen Mei-er protect anyone like this before. This time, for him, she even contradicted me. This is not normal. Long Zai Tian frowned. Long Hui was extremely jealous. Mei-er is now in the mine. Grandpa, do you want to make a move again? Long Zai Tian looked at Long Hui with some resentment. Grandpa making a move is not a problem. Killing him is also easy. But if because of his death, Mei-er will have resentment towards you, do you think it is worth it? Long Hui was startled and shook his head. It is not worth it. But do you want to let him and Mei-er develop like this? I cannot stand it. You. Long Zai Tian couldn't help but sigh. Learn more from your big brother. See how he deals with the woman he likes. If you want Mei-er, you have to put in more effort. Grandfather can help you kill people, but I can't help you obtain a woman's heart, right? Hu Man has never had a son in his life. He only has Jiao-er and Mei-er, these two daughters. If you and your elder brother can capture both of them, then in the future, the blood group will belong to my Long family. My Long family's 3 generations have worked hard for the blood group for decades. It's time to taste the taste of being a master. Ooh. Hearing this, Long Hui felt his blood boil. He nodded and said, It's my Long family's turn to be the master. Rest assured, Grandfather, Mei-er will not be able to escape. Big Brother will definitely be able to capture Hu Jiao-er. And it's good that you have this ambition. Long Zai Tian smiled and nodded. Long Hui bitterly looked at Yang Kai in the distance, still somewhat restless. Grandpa, then this person, find your own chance. He's not that strong. You can handle him. Yes. Long Hui smiled coldly. He couldn't make a move now. After all, Hu Mei-er would come out later, but since he was a disciple of the Sky Tower Pavilion, he couldn't escape. Yang Kai waited outside for a while before Hu Mei-er came out dripping with fragrant sweat. With a smile on her face, she stuffed 4 seeds into Yang Kai's hand. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Since the blood group's miss wanted to buy something, how could the disciples dare not sell it? Thank you. Yang Kai carefully put the 4 seeds into his bosom. standing in the same place for a long time, Yang Kai struggled to say, "You helped me once, I'll return the favor." Hu Mei Er looked at him strangely. "What do you mean?" Yang Kai waved his hand. "You follow me?" Although Hu Mei Er didn't know what he wanted to do, she still obediently followed him. After walking for about 300 feet, Yang Kai suddenly stopped and lightly stamped his foot. "Remember where I am standing now, about 70 feet underground. There should be some unusual things." Hu Mei Er's eyes widened, puzzled. "How do you know?" Yang Kai muttered, "I practice a type of martial skill. As long as there is yang attribute energy within a certain range, I can feel it. There is a yang attribute treasure here. The energy it emits is thousands of times purer than the yang inflammation stone." When he had first arrived here, Kai Yang had felt that this place was different from other places, but after considering it for a long time, he still decided to tell Hu Mei Er this news. Firstly, this was the blood group's territory, so even if he coveted it, he wouldn't be able to obtain it. Secondly, he really did want to repay Hu Mei Er's favor. Today, when she had helped him, Kai Yang had seen it all. Ah. Hearing Yang Kai's words, Hu Mei Er was startled. "Do you believe me?" "I believe," Hu Mei Er answered very straightforwardly. This made Yang Kai feel a little moved. "Then it's fine." Yang Kai smiled. "Although I don't know what is below, this thing's value is definitely not low. Besides this, there seems to be something else, but I can't feel what it is. But I reckon that the secret hidden below is the root of the blood group's mining area. Or it could be said that because of its existence, there is an underground mine here." Hu Mei Er couldn't help but be moved. If what Yang Kai said was true, then the secret below was absolutely important. "You are a smart girl. You should know what to do," Yang Kai solemnly said. "I understand." Hu Mei Er nodded repeatedly. "Well, let's go," Yang Kai said with a smile. And walking in the dense forest, Hu Mei Er and Yang Kai didn't speak again, only enjoying this moment of tranquility. Hu Mei Er was very happy because Yang Kai told her such important information. It was clear that his impression of her had greatly changed. She still remembered that last time he didn't give her any face, ordering her around. But this time was different. He was much gentler to her. "Let's part here." Yang Kai suddenly stopped his footsteps, causing Hu Mei Er to stare blankly. Unknowingly, the two of them had already arrived at the fork in the road. Time passed so quickly. Hu Mei Er was somewhat resentful. "Goodbye," Yang Kai said, and hurriedly walked towards High Heaven Pavilion. What a free and easy man. Hu Mei Er smiled bitterly. Chapter 62. Beside the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai was concentrating on cultivating. Not far from him, there were several Three Suns fruit trees growing healthily. The largest tree had already borne 3 fruits and was about to ripen. The smallest one was just a small sapling that had just broken through the ground. Since the day he returned from the blood group's mining area, Yang Kai had been cultivating here day and night, forgetting to eat and sleep. Long Zai Tian's unreasonable actions had made him hold back his desire to become stronger. That humiliation, sooner or later, he would take it back with his own 2 hands. After nearly 10 days of bitter cultivation, the tempered body 9th stage had already faintly reached the peak. Seeing that he was about to break through, Yang Kai felt helpless. He knew that breaking through a large realm required some opportunities, and it was not as easy as breaking through a small realm. Even if the Yuan Qi in his body was enough, he still needed to find the right opportunity to comprehend what he needed to comprehend. Speaking of which, these days of cultivation could be considered smooth sailing. Every day he did not need to sweep the floor, so he had more time to cultivate. The 3-leaved Chaos Spirit Flower and dead Jedi Tree grass had long been used up. Without the suppression of the strange fragrance, the true Yang tactic circulation speed was significantly faster than before. This made it easier for Yang Kai to absorb the Yang Qi from heaven and earth. However, The yang liquid that he had condensed these days was all used to catalyze the three suns' fruit seeds. There was not a single drop left in the dantian. The energy of heaven and earth gathered around him, waiting for Yang Kai to break through the mysteries of the initial element stage. Then it would pour into his body and cleanse his body. However, sitting cross-legged on the ground, Yang Kai did not succeed. After a day and a night, Yang Kai was still stagnant. Although his mood was not anxious, he was unable to break through the shackles that bound him. It was really strange. Deep in the night, under the vast star field beside the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai suddenly fell into a state of hesitation. His yuan qi was slightly disordered, and a painful expression appeared between his brows. Not far away, Xia Ningchang, who was quietly watching Yang Kai, couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. Although he was quite a distance away, Xia Ningchang could still feel the unusual fluctuation of yuan qi. This fluctuation of yuan qi contained a cold and evil aura. How could this be? This was clearly a sign that a misfire would become the demon race. He had only broken through from body tempering stage level 9 to the initial element stage. So how could he possibly become the demon race? To put it bluntly, a weak cultivator like Yang Kai was not qualified to become the demon race even if he wanted to. Only when one's strength was one step higher would such a situation occur in the process of cultivation. But now, this kind of thing was really about to happen to Yang Kai. Xia Ningchang's beautiful eyebrows slightly wrinkled. She couldn't understand. She was here because she found it herself. After all, she had silently observed Yang Kai for more than 2 years and had long since become a habit. These days, Yang Kai's sudden disappearance gave birth to a feeling of loneliness for no reason. It was as if she had lost interest in doing anything. After searching everywhere, she finally found him beside the coiling dragon stream. Only then did a big stone fall from her heart. After arriving here, Xia Ningchang knew that Yang Kai was about to break through. After waiting for an entire day, Yang Kai actually did not succeed. Now that such a strange thing had happened, how could she not be puzzled? Just as Xia Ningchang was secretly anxious, a pure and rich hot aura suddenly gushed out of Yang Kai's body. With this aura gushing out, the traces of the misfire that had become the demon race were instantly burned away. Yang Kai's yuan qi fluctuations immediately stabilized. True yang energy. Xia Ningchang's small mouth opened slightly, her beautiful eyes filled with surprise. She almost exclaimed, "How can it be so pure?" That hot aura was clearly yang energy. Many of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples cultivated fire or yang attribute martial skills and had this kind of hot yuan qi in their bodies. However, no matter which disciple it was, they were far from being as pure as Yang Kai's. This hot aura was not too strong. After all, Yang Kai's strength was not high, but it was exceptionally clean without the slightest impurities, like an unpolluted water source. Before she could recover, Xia Ningchang discovered that Yang Kai had once again fallen into that misfire that had become the demon race. A somewhat evil aura replaced the hot yuan qi and slowly spread out from Yang Kai's body. After a while, another burst of true yang energy erupted, suppressing this evil aura and allowing Yang Kai to recover. This repeated several times, leaving Xia Ningchang dumbfounded. She had never seen such a bizarre situation occur when a cultivator was breaking through to the initial element realm. Generally speaking, breaking through to the initial element realm was indeed met with some resistance, but after all, this realm was very low and could be broken through with a little effort. However, Yang Kai's current situation was obviously different. The resistance he faced was greater than anyone else, and it was already comparable to the difficulty of breaking through to the next realm. Yang Kai was also suffering unspeakably. Just a moment ago, he had faintly glimpsed a trace of mystery and had already taken one step into the threshold of the initial element realm. However, at this moment, the bones in his body suddenly emitted an evil aura, almost causing him to lose his mind. Fortunately, the true Yang Yuan Qi in his body erupted, waking him up. Now, there were two types of energy fighting in his body. One was the true Yang Yuan Qi that he cultivated, and the other was the evil aura emitted from his bones. They fought endlessly, using his body as a battlefield. Sometimes the evil aura would gain the upper hand, and then his mind would become somewhat unclear. A sense of excitement and bloodlust surged in his heart, and he could not wait to find someone to kill. This feeling was similar to the excitement one would feel after being injured, but there was something different about it. Although he was excited and bloodthirsty when he was injured in battle, his mind was clear. Sometimes the true Yang Yuan Qi would gain the upper hand, and his mind would be clear and his body would feel comfortable. The fight was endless, and it seemed like there was no winner or loser. Yang Kai was suffering to death. Xia Ningchang dashed through High Heaven Pavilion wearing a tight black suit, showing off her graceful figure without a doubt. Her slender waist and slender legs were enough to cause people to daydream. Her beautiful hair was tied behind her head, and her face was covered with a black cloth. She quickly rushed over to Yang Kai. She watched for a long time, and her heart was really worried for Yang Kai. After thinking it over, she decided to help Yang Kai. Generally speaking, a person should not be disturbed when they were breaking through, but Xia Ningchang could clearly feel the surging battle intent in Yang Kai's body. It was a battle intent that longed for a baptism of blood. Only a battle could free him from this endless cycle. So Xia Ningchang first returned to her residence and changed her clothes. Otherwise, she was afraid that he would recognize her. After all, they had met before. Coming and going in a hurry, when she returned to the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai was still in torment, and his movements seemed to be a bit louder than before. Without the slightest hesitation, Xia Ningchang directly threw herself at Yang Kai, her beautiful eyes surging with killing intent as she sent out a palm strike. Chapter 63. Since she had already decided to help him, Xia Ningchang naturally didn't dare to reveal any flaws. She could only force Yang Kai to use all her strength to help him break through. Therefore, Xia Ningchang used a killing move with the first palm strike. Yang Kai's strength was at the 9th level of the body-tempering realm, while Xia Ningchang only used the strength of the 3rd or 3rd level of the initial element realm. Yang Kai, who was at a critical juncture, suddenly felt a sense of danger. He couldn't help but feel a chill all over his body. He couldn't help but feel a sense of crisis. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the sound of a palm strike whistling through the air came from the side. Someone was sneak attacking him. Yang Kai suddenly realized, instead of being shocked, he was happy. He quickly jumped up from the ground, turned around, and threw a punch. The battle intent in his body was raging. He was worried about how to vent it, but he didn't expect someone to deliver themselves to him. Who was it that wanted to sneak attack him was no longer within the scope of Yang Kai's consideration. Right now, he only wanted to fight to his heart's content. With a bang, the Yuan Qi surged. Yang Kai staggered back a few steps. Xia Ningchang used the force to do a somersault and steadily landed on the ground. A trace of surprise flashed through her beautiful eyes. Although she had only used the strength of the 3rd level of the initial element realm, she shouldn't have been able to fight evenly with him. She should have been able to suppress him steadily. After exchanging a blow, Yang Kai used the moonlight to clearly see the figure of the attacker. It was a woman, but her face was covered with a black cloth, so he couldn't see her face. Why is it a little girl? Yang Kai frowned and muttered with some dissatisfaction. When Xia Ningchang heard this, she was so angry that she trembled. She clenched her teeth and lightly flew over. The Yuan Qi in her palm surged, turning into a sky full of palm shadows. and covered Yang Kai's head. What he said just now made her very angry. Yang Kai let out a low roar and unleashed all of his strength. Yuan Qi circulated around his fists, and in an instant, he exchanged blows with Xia Ningchang. Although his opponent was a woman, Yang Kai didn't show any mercy. His opponent's strength was clearly higher than his, and every move she made was a killing technique. He didn't dare to be careless. In the blink of an eye, Yang Kai and Xia Ningchang were locked in battle, but the situation was obviously not in Yang Kai's favor. His moves were heavy and powerful, and although the lethality was fierce, they were far from Xia Ningchang's nimble and versatile moves. When Yang Kai made 2 moves, Xia Ningchang could make 3 moves. Furthermore, Xia Ningchang's body was light and graceful, and as he moved around, he only played with Yang Kai like a monkey. It could be said that Yang Kai was frustrated at every turn. He could sense that the other party's strength was slightly higher than his, but he would never have thought that the other party was only suppressing his true strength to fight him. Facing such an enemy, it would be strange if he could hit her. Under the black mask, Xia Ningchang's angry little mouth slowly formed a smile. She thought to herself, "Who told you to talk nonsense? You deserve to be beaten." In just a few moments, Yang Kai's entire body was in pain from the beating. As the familiar pain spread throughout his body, the blood in his body became excited once again, surging like a great river. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the sound of waves slapping against the table. The warmth in his body spread out, and his strength rose steadily. Xia Ningchang's eyes showed a dignified expression. She found that the Yuan Qi in this junior brother's body was surging more and more vigorously, and his strength was gradually breaking through the body-tempering realm and reaching the initial element realm. Moreover, it didn't stop there, and was slowly but steadily increasing. The punches that carried the Yuan Qi became faster and stronger. Xia Ningchang was faintly unable to bear it. She wanted to increase her strength, but she was somewhat unwilling, so she could only grit her teeth and endure. "Who told you to kill me?" In the midst of the fierce battle, Yang Kai suddenly asked with a gloomy face and a low voice. Xia Ningchang didn't answer and tried her best to resolve Yang Kai's moves. After fighting for so long, Kai Yang's strength was actually on par with his own, and he couldn't gain the upper hand at all. Every time he was swept by Kai Yang's fists, he would have to divert some of his attention to neutralize the pure Yang Qi invading his body. Xia Ningchang was shocked. She found that she had underestimated the purity of this Yang Qi. This purity was not something that could be cultivated by ordinary martial arts. Once again, in a head-on confrontation, Yang Kai and Xia Ningchang's palms crossed, but neither side retreated. Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and stared at the woman in front of him. His gaze fell on her forehead, where there was a faint mark. Yang Kai said, "I found that you look like a senior sister of mine." Xia Ningchang was resisting the invasion of Yang Kai's Yang Qi. When she heard this, she was stunned. When did she expose herself? How could she know that it was precisely because of the faint mark on her forehead that Yang Kai would suspect her? Yang Kai remembered that senior sister Xia had a sapphire pendant on her forehead, right where the mark was. Xia Ningchang nervously blinked her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling incessantly. Laughing out loud, Kai Yang suddenly grabbed her wrist and fiercely pulled her into his embrace. Reaching out, he pulled off her face scarf. At this time, Xia Ningchang suddenly came back to her senses. She did not want to see her real face. First, she wanted to put pressure on Yang Kai. And second, she was a little embarrassed. After all, what happened last time was too embarrassing. How could she be willing to let him take off her mask now? In a moment of desperation, he could no longer suppress his strength. A ferocious burst of world qi burst out, causing Kai Yang to cry out strangely. He was directly sent flying far away, tumbling several times on the ground. When he got up again, that woman was nowhere to be seen. He did not know where she had run off to. Could it be true? Yang Kai pondered. He had just said it casually, but he did not expect the other party to have such a big reaction. Moreover, that last burst of yuan qi made Yang Kai realize that there was a big gap between their strength. If she really wanted to kill him, it would be a piece of cake. Why would she need to fight with him for so long? Whether it was true or not was no longer important. Yang Kai felt that the shackles on his body had been broken after that battle. He quickly sat down cross-legged and carefully felt the energy between heaven and earth. In the next moment, the energy of heaven and earth surged, fiercely pouring into Yang Kai. Yang Kai took a deep breath, and all the pores on his body opened up like a whale sucking in water. He absorbed all the energy of heaven and earth into his body, guiding the enormous power of heaven and earth to circulate in his body, cleansing his body. This was an opportunity that every cultivator would have when they broke through a big realm. As for how much benefit they would get, it would depend on their own efforts. 1,000 feet away, Xia Ningchang panicked as she clutched her chest. She didn't think that Kai Yang would be able to see through her identity. Fortunately, she had helped him break through, so her efforts weren't in vain. While she was panicking, a figure suddenly appeared beside her. An old man wearing simple clothes suddenly appeared. The old man had white hair and a kind appearance. After seeing the other party's face, Xia Ningchang hurriedly said respectfully, "Greetings, martial uncle sect master." The old man smiled kindly. "You are not a disciple of High Heaven Pavilion, so there is no need to be so polite," Xia Ningchang said softly, "but sect master and master are good friends, so naturally you are my martial uncle." Chapter 64. Seeing that Xia Ningchang was so obedient and sensible, the sect master couldn't help but laugh. "Meng Wuya is really lucky to have such a good disciple like you." Thinking of his two disciples, the sect master let out a long sigh. Xia Ningchang obviously knew about his past. Seeing his gloomy expression, he didn't know how to comfort him and could only remain silent. The sect master silently stretched out his hand to block the sky and pushed towards Yang Kai. In an instant, Xia Ningchang felt that the heaven and earth were separated, as if there was an invisible hand blocking anyone's prying eyes. This brat's breakthrough this time should have caused quite a commotion. It's better to take precautions to avoid being discovered, the sect master explained. Xia Ningchang felt a bit strange. He didn't understand why this sect master, who rarely appeared in front of others, was so attentive to Yang Kai. Although he was puzzled, he didn't dare to ask. The old man and the young man were separated by a distance of 100 feet, watching the situation on Yang Kai's side. The heaven and earth energy entered Yang Kai's body, impacting and tempering every inch of his flesh and skin. Although he couldn't feel the fluctuations of the yuan qi, he could see with the naked eye that Yang Kai was within 100 feet of him. It was obvious that the commotion was not small. He had just broken through to the initial element realm. How could this be? Xia Ningchang really couldn't understand. As time passed, Yang Kai's body slowly swelled up like an inflated balloon. His skinny body grew fatter for no reason. This was because too much heaven and earth energy had entered his body. Just as Xia Ningchang was secretly worried about him, his body suddenly shrunk back and returned to its original size. Even with the sect master's method of blocking, Xia Ningchang could still feel the fluctuations of the yuan qi that made his heart palpitate. What was even more shocking was that after Yang Kai had completely absorbed the heaven and earth energy, a fiery red energy visible to the naked eye burst out from the coiling dragon stream in front of him. This energy was like a red ribbon that rose from the bottom of the coiling dragon stream and drilled into Yang Kai's pores. Yang Qi, Xia Ningchang understood that Yang Kai's first absorption was of heaven and earth energy, but the second absorption was of Yang essence Qi. Although it was also a type of heaven and earth energy, it was of a single attribute. After the Yang Yuan Qi was completely absorbed by Yang Kai, The commotion over there suddenly subsided. "It's done." The sect leader smiled and removed the restriction on that side with a flick of his finger. His figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. His faint voice sounded in Xia Ning Chang's ears. "Say hello to your master for me." "Yes." Xia Ning Chang responded respectfully. Then he had time to check on the results of Yang Kai's breakthrough. With just one glance, Xia Ning Chang was stunned. Second level of the initial element realm. She almost thought that her perception was wrong, so she checked again worriedly. She found that Yang Kai had really reached level 2 of the initial element state. This time, not only did he break through a large realm, but he also broke through a small realm on top of this foundation. Was she dreaming? Xia Ning Chang had a special physique. Since his cultivation until now, he had made rapid progress. However, every time he broke through, it was one step at a time. He had never broken through 2 levels at once. Today, seeing Yang Kai achieve such a feat with his own eyes, how could he not be surprised? Just as he was surprised, Yang Kai, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly muttered to himself, "So that's how it is." As soon as his voice fell, the Yuan Qi fluctuations on his body became stronger. Third level of the initial element state. Monster! Xia Ning Chang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His confidence was once again hit. After staying in place for another 2 hours to make sure that Yang Kai wouldn't suddenly break through, Xia Ning Chang sighed in relief and quietly left. Yang Kai sat at the edge of the coiling dragon stream all night. He didn't cultivate the true Yang tactics, but instead used his heart to feel and comprehend the insights of last night's breakthrough. After last night's breakthrough, 2 kinds of energy poured into his body. One was the power of heaven and earth, but this energy wasn't absorbed into the dantian. Besides a part of it being used to temper his body, the rest was absorbed by his bones. The second was the Yang Yuan Qi absorbed from the bottom of the coiling dragon stream. This had become his own and had already turned into 5 drops of Yang liquid, quietly settling in the dantian. After thinking for a whole night, Yang Kai finally figured out a general idea. The unyielding golden skeleton could increase his combat strength when he was injured or felt pain, but this increase in combat strength also required energy to support it. It couldn't be produced for no reason. Thinking about it this way, it wasn't difficult to explain why it could absorb the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth was absorbed by it, and when he needed it, it would give back to him. This was the mystery of the unyielding golden skeleton, and also the fundamental reason why it could increase his combat strength. For a long time, Yang Kai thought that he could only absorb Yang attribute energy. After all, he cultivated the true Yang tactics. Now, it seemed that this problem was worth experimenting with. If he could really absorb energy other than the Yang attribute, then his cultivation in the future would be much faster. This discovery made Yang Kai somewhat happy. Although the true Yang tactics was powerful, after all, it had its limitations. If his guess was correct, then he wouldn't have to worry about his cultivation environment in the future. Letting out a long breath, Yang Kai stood up and carefully felt his body. He had indeed broken through, and unexpectedly broke through to the initial element 3rd stage in one fell swoop. Thinking about the 2 enormous amounts of energy that poured into his body last night, Yang Kai was relieved. When the Yuan Qi in the body first opened, it was at the initial element stage. Although Yang Kai already had a lot of Yuan Qi in his body, this breakthrough was still significant. The Yuan Qi in his body formed a large cycle connecting the heavens and earth, and the true Yang tactics once again sped up. Moreover, after breaking through to this stage, to some extent, it was much easier to cultivate compared to the tempered body stage. Of course, the premise was that you had a good cultivation environment. Walking back from the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai felt both physically and mentally comfortable. After breaking through to this stage, he now felt that the world was somewhat different, and his eyes and ears were much clearer. Within 50 feet, he could even faintly feel a person's breathing. While walking towards the wooden house, Yang Kai suddenly heard a familiar scream. After pausing and listening for a moment, he couldn't help but laugh. Why was Sassafras being beaten again? But this was inside the sect. If he was beaten, then it should be a challenge. If his skills were not as good as others, then he couldn't blame others. Since there was nothing to do, Yang Kai decided to go and watch the show. Within the High Heaven Pavilion, as long as there was a challenge, anywhere could be a battlefield. The place where Sassafras was beaten was not far from Yang Kai, so after walking a short distance, he arrived. There were quite a few people gathered there. Sweeping his eyes over them, Kai Yang discovered that the people there were divided into two groups. They were clearly divided, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Li Yun Tian and Zhao Hu, who he was familiar with, were all there, but their expressions were somewhat angry. They were currently confronting another group of people. The situation was not right. Yang Kai frowned as he saw this. When comparing notes between sect disciples, no matter who won or lost, it would definitely not end up like this. Li Yun Tian and the others clearly looked like they were filled with righteous indignation and wanted to fight. Chapter 65. In addition to these two groups of people, there were also many High Heaven Pavilion disciples gathered to watch the show. There were quite a few of them, and they were all pointing at the field. With some doubts, Yang Kai squeezed into the crowd and slowly walked to where Li Yun Tian and the others were. Inadvertently glancing at the field, he found that Sassafras's face was bruised and swollen. He was in a very sorry state as he fought with a young man who was not much older than him. The young man's face was calm and composed, and there was not the slightest injury on his body. He had a contemptuous smile on his face as he dealt with Sassafras' attacks while taunting him. Sassafras roared in a low voice and bravely rushed forward, but his attacks were easily dealt with by his opponent. After watching for a moment, Yang Kai's brows slightly wrinkled. He found that something was wrong. It was not that Sassafras' attacks did not hit the young man, but rather that his attacks had no effect on the young man. When his fists landed on the young man's body, the young man did not even frown. On the other hand, if Sassafras was hit, he would definitely suffer some small injuries. The yuan qi fluctuations that burst out from the two's moves were almost the same, which meant that their strength was not much different. How could there be such a difference when they fought? What's going on? Yang Kai patted Li Yun Tian's shoulder and asked. Li Yun Tian turned around, his expression overjoyed. Brother Yang! With this shout, Zhao Hu and the others also noticed Yang Kai. They all greeted him and turned around to face the opposite group of people. Why is Sassafras not his opponent? Yang Kai asked his doubts. Their strength should be about the same, right? Li Yun Tian quickly nodded, his expression resentful, and young Master Su is currently at the initial element second stage, while that person is at the initial element third stage. If it was a fair fight, even if young Master Su is not his opponent, he would not have it easy. But this person is really despicable and shameless. He is actually using a defensive artifact to challenge his fellow disciples. How could young Master Su use his skills? Yang Kai's expression sank. Defensive artifact? Yes. Li Yun Tian clenched his teeth and said, he is the Great Elder's grandson. His name is Wei Xuan. His defensive artifact was bestowed upon him by the Great Elder. Another spoiled brat? Yang Kai faintly understood that there was an elder behind Sassafras, and this Wei Xuan was the grandson of the Great Elder. Everyone had their own backing, and their status was about the same. Others did not dare to fight Sassafras, but that did not mean that he did not dare to. However, it was a bit too much for disciples of the same sect to wear defensive artifacts while exchanging pointers. First Elder and Second Elder have always been at odds. Even young Master Su and Wei Zhuan don't see eye to eye with each other. This time, he will definitely ruthlessly teach young Master Su a lesson. Li Yuntian was secretly anxious. Yang Kai said, "Oh, so it's just a boring infighting. Brother Yang, please think of a way to save young Master Su. You know his temper. If this continues, he will definitely be seriously injured." Li Yuntian pleaded. Yang Kai's expression was indifferent. When disciples of the same sect are exchanging pointers, the weaker will be beaten. Do you think High Heaven Pavilion disciples are afraid of this? But this battle was never fair. Wei Zhuan is relying on the power of his artifact. Yang Kai sneered. This world is never fair. The weak are prey to the strong, and the strong are respected. You should already know this. Li Yuntian was stunned, and was also speechless. When disciples of the same sect were exchanging pointers, they really could not interfere. Although Yang Kai's performance in the past few days was fierce, the sect rules were still there. How could they expect him to save Sassafras like last time? In the arena, Sassafras was already on the verge of collapsing. He did not have much strength left in his moves. Wei Zhuan, on the other hand, laughed loudly and proudly. He patted his chest and said, "Sassafras, don't be polite. Come and hit me. This young master will not move today. If you can hit me until it hurts, then I will admit defeat." Sassafras's eyes were blurred. Both of his fists were stained with blood. Wei Zhuan's defensive artifact not only had the ability to protect him, it also had the ability to reflect Yuan Qi. Every time Sassafras punched, he would have to bear most of the force. This was why both of his fists were injured. Hearing Wei Zhuan's savage words, Sassafras spat out a mouthful of blood and said with disdain, "If you have the guts, then take off that turtle shell of yours. If this young master doesn't beat you until you crawl, then you are not my grandson." Wei Zhuan's expression turned cold. His face suddenly turned sinister, and he laughed. "You have guts. You dare to take advantage of me. You will pay the price for your words." Wei Zhuan was clearly enraged. He rushed in front of Sassafras and threw a punch at Sassafras's face. In his weakened state, Sassafras tried to block, but his condition was not as good as his opponent's, and he could not block the attack. His face was immediately hit by the fist and swelled up. His body was also turned around. Wei Zhuan's aura was like that of a tiger. He did not stop there. He directly kicked Sassafras to the ground and fiercely punched him with both of his fists. Sassafras tried to resist, but it was to no avail. The artifact that Wei Zhuan was wearing was not small. It was not something that Sassafras could break. "Call me Grandpa, and this young master will let you go." Wei Zhuan stopped after hitting for a while and threatened. Sassafras looked at him coldly and laughed with disdain. Last time, Sassafras was almost hit in the head by Chung Xiaofeng, but he did not yield. How could he compromise this time? "I'll let you laugh." Wei Zhuan did not show any mercy. After a few punches, Sassafras lost one of his teeth and blood flowed out of his nostrils. His appearance was too horrible to look at. This Wei Zhuan was even more ruthless than Chung Xiaofeng. Young Master Su, Li Yuntian, and the others could not watch any longer. They quickly stepped forward, but due to the rules of the sect, they could not go forward to rescue Sassafras. Wei Zhuan did not attack again. Instead, he looked at Li Yuntian and the others with a cold smile and said, "You want to save him?" Li Yuntian and the others did not answer. They took deep breaths, and their expressions were filled with righteous indignation. "Let me ask you, do you want to save him?" Wei Zhuan slapped Sassafras's face and asked fiercely. Seeing that Sassafras was attacked again, Li Yuntian and the others quickly nodded, afraid that he would attack again. "If you want to, then kneel. Obediently kowtow a few times. If this young master is in a good mood, then I'll let him go today." Wei Zhuan could not deal with Sassafras, so he set his sights on Li Yuntian and the others. After all, these people were Sassafras's subordinates. Humiliating them was the same as humiliating Sassafras. Hearing this, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Li Yun Tian and the others' faces were ashen and extremely humiliated. Sassafras struggled to look at Li Yun Tian and the others. His eyes were about to crack as he said, one word at a time, "Don't listen to him." With a "pa" sound, Sassafras was slapped again. Li Yun Tian and the others were shocked. They knew that if they continued to hesitate, Sassafras would be tortured again. They looked at Wei Zhuan hatefully. Their faces were filled with endless grief as they slowly knelt down. Yang Kai looked at them in astonishment. He did not expect that they would go to such an extent for Sassafras. A man's knees were gold. If they did not have deep feelings for each other, who would be willing to kneel for others? Yang Kai originally thought that Li Yun Tian and the others were just following Sassafras around to eat and drink. Now, it seems that this was not the case. Wei Zhuan narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. He looked down at Sassafras and said, "I didn't expect that the dogs you trained were so obedient." Sassafras's eyes were filled with tears of humiliation. Even when he was beaten into a pig's head by Wei Zhuan, he did not shed a single tear. But now, seeing Li Yun Tian and the others kneeling on the ground, those 2 lines of tears could not help but flow. Chapter 66. Looking at Li Yun Tian and the others kneeling on the ground, Wei Zhuan's face became even more smug as he laughed out loud. "Just kneeling doesn't show your sincerity." Li Yun Tian and the others' faces were ashen as they clenched their teeth and prostrated themselves with their heads on the ground. Their voices carried boundless sorrow. "Brother Wei, please be merciful." Wei Zhuan's eyes narrowed as his smile gradually disappeared. Li Yun Tian and the other's sense of righteousness caused him to be moved. "Wei Zhuan." Sassafras swallowed the mouthful of blood into his stomach. "You and I can't exist under the same sky." "That's exactly what I was thinking." Wei Zhuan clasped his hands together and fiercely smashed them towards Sassafras' chest. With a bang, Sassafras spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted from the pain. Young Master Su, Li Yun Tian, and the others roared. They never would have thought that Wei Zhuan would dare to break his promise in front of so many people. "Don't let a single one go," Wei Zhuan fiercely ordered as he stood up from Sassafras' body and kicked him like a dead dog. The group of Sky Tower disciples who were previously confronting Li Yun Tian and the others all sneered as they charged forward, blocking Li Yun Tian, and the others as they issued a challenge. Li Yun Tian and the others were furious and didn't know how to vent their anger, now that the other side had delivered themselves to their doorstep. How could they not accept? This was a brazen group fight, but each side had a fixed opponent. Wei Zhuan sneered as he looked at Li Yun Tian and the others and ridiculed, "Who dares to not accept beat them to death. If they die, it'll be my fault." He clearly wanted to teach this group of people who followed Sassafras a lesson and let them know the consequences of following the wrong person. Because Yang Kai was close to Li Yun Tian and the others, he was also targeted by one of Wei Zhuan's subordinates. This person rushed in front of Yang Kai and reported his name. He didn't even wait for Yang Kai to respond before directly attacking. Yang Kai kicked out with a thunderous force and landed on the person's stomach. The person immediately knelt down. His strength was probably only at the tempered body boundary, so according to the rules, he wasn't qualified to challenge Yang Kai, but since he had asked for it, he couldn't blame anyone else. Flashing through the chaotic battlefield, Yang Kai walked towards Sassafras step by step. Wei Zhuan narrowed his eyes as he sized up Yang Kai. A trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Wei Zhuan naturally knew how many people Sassafras had, and who they were. However, he had never seen Yang Kai before. For a moment, he couldn't figure out the identity of Yang Kai. Yang Kai remained silent. He walked up to Sassafras with a cold face and reached out to check his breathing. He was relieved to find that Sassafras had only fainted. "Who are you?" Wei Xuan was immediately unhappy. He had a grudge with Sassafras, and this person actually dared to check on Sassafras's injuries in front of him. He clearly didn't put him in his eyes. Yang Kai stood up and quietly looked at Wei Xuan. "This young master is asking who you are." Wei Xuan raised his chin and asked in a stern voice, "Trial disciple Yang Kai, please enlighten me." Yang Kai cupped his hands towards Wei Xuan. This was the etiquette of Sky Tower disciples when they challenged each other. "Yang Kai?" Wei Xuan was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized, "You are the Yang Kai who has been in the limelight recently? You flatter me, but if there is no one else in the sect called Yang Kai, then I am." What a joke! A trifling trial disciple dares to challenge this young master. "Do you have the qualifications?" Wei Xuan sneered. According to the sect's rules, as long as the difference in strength between disciples is less than 3 levels, they can challenge each other. This young master is at the initial element boundary 3rd level. "Who do you think you are?" Wei Xuan said disdainfully. Trial disciples were disciples who had not broken through to the initial element boundary. Since they had not broken through, then they must be more than 3 levels away from him. "I am also at the initial element boundary 3rd level," Yang Kai replied indifferently. A series of bewildered voices rang out. "Impossible! Yang Kai is already at the initial element boundary 3rd level? Didn't they say that it took him 3 years to reach the tempered body 3rd level? Did I say it wrong? Or did I remember it wrong?" "That's strange. When Yang Kai challenged me, he was only at the tempered body 8th level. How did he reach this level in less than a month?" All kinds of doubts were raised. Wei Xuan also looked at Yang Kai suspiciously, as if he was wondering if he was telling the truth. Since he had already reached the initial element boundary, why was he still a trial disciple? How could he know that Yang Kai had only broken through last night, and he had directly broken through from the tempered body 9th level to this level? "Now I have the qualifications to challenge you, right?" Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and asked, a fierce light flashing in his eyes. "If you really have the strength, then you do have the qualifications." Wei Xuan nodded and laughed sinisterly. "If you are not afraid of death," Yang Kai said indifferently, "I hope you are not afraid of death." Shameless boasting. Wei Xuan was furious. He thought to himself, "I am wearing a defensive artifact. Even a cultivator at the peak of the initial element boundary would not be able to break through my defense. I am in an invincible position. How can you, an initial element boundary 3rd level, win against me? Come, I will let you try punching me." Wei Xuan waved at Yang Kai arrogantly. How could Yang Kai be polite? He rushed up and directly punched Wei Xuan in the chest. The burning hot true Yang Yuan Qi poured in. Not only did it not hurt Wei Xuan, but Yang Kai's body shook, and he staggered back a few steps. He looked down and saw that his fist was completely red. It was obvious that he had been injured by his own Yuan Qi. "Ha! You overestimate yourself." Wei Xuan became more and more proud of himself. Before he finished speaking, he was startled again. This was because he discovered that Yang Kai's eyes had suddenly turned red. A fierce wave of Yuan Qi came from his body, bringing with it a boiling heat. His eyes did not have the slightest trace of fear, only excitement. These eyes were like the eyes of a fierce beast. When it saw a prey it was interested in, it was the precursor to a violent attack. For no reason, Wei Xuan's heart skipped a beat. Yang Kai had already pounced forward with a grin. A drop of yang liquid quietly appeared on his fingertips. With a thought, it transformed into a blood-red blade, as thin as a cicada's wing. The blood-red light flashed, followed by a light-piercing sound. Yang Kai and Wei Xuan's bodies crossed each other. Wei Xuan only felt a chill in his abdomen. He looked down, and his heart sank to the bottom. He screamed, "My embroidered cloud chainmail!" This embroidered cloud chainmail was a common middle-level defensive artifact. Although its grade was not high, it was very suitable for a cultivator of his level. The great elder had obtained it from somewhere and gave it to him. At that time, the great elder had clearly said that an initial element cultivator would not be able to break through the defense of this artifact unless they used a powerful martial skill. But now, the artifact that he had placed such high hopes on had actually been cut open by a mere initial element stage, third stage trial disciple in a single round. What kind of weapon did he just use? Could it be that the blood-red weapon was also an artifact, and its grade was even higher than the embroidered cloud chainmail? If it was not, how could it have such an amazing effect? Chapter 67. At this moment, Wei Xuan was both shocked and distressed. He was shocked that his embroidered cloud chainmail couldn't defend against the opponent's attack. He was distressed that this defensive artifact had been cut open and had completely lost its ability to defend. In his extreme anger, Wei Xuan turned around and threw himself at Yang Kai, shouting, "You dare break my artifact! I'll kill you!" Wei Xuan was also at the initial element boundary third stage, so when he used his full strength, his strength wouldn't be too bad. But Yang Kai had already killed an initial element boundary fifth stage cultivator when he was in the tempered body stage. So what could a trifling third stage cultivator do? When Wei Xuan arrived in front of him, the blood-red blade in his hand crisscrossed and slashed a few times. Wei Xuan's body suddenly froze. His fist was only 3 inches away from Yang Kai, but he couldn't hit him. This was because he could feel a burning sensation in his chest. His eyes trembled as he looked down and saw the blood-red blade in Yang Kai's hand. It was like a snake spitting out its tongue, swallowing and spitting as it pressed against his chest. A defensive artifact, it's not that great. Kai Yang sneered. His eyes swept over Wei Xuan's close-fitting embroidered cloud chainmail, which had several large cracks. Yang Kai was also surprised. He didn't think that the blade formed from his yang liquid would be this sharp. If he really fought with Wei Xuan, although he could win, it definitely wouldn't be this easy. He was only relying on the power of the yang liquid. But since the opponent was relying on the embroidered cloud chainmail, why couldn't he use the yang liquid? "You dare to hurt me." Wei Xuan's face trembled as he looked at Yang Kai with a ferocious expression. Even if his life was in Yang Kai's hands, he didn't have the slightest fear. He was the grandson of the first elder. With such a revered status, no one in Sky Tower had the guts to hurt him. "Little brat, you don't know. My grandfather is the first elder. If you dare to hurt me, you're dead." Wei Xuan threatened. Yang Kai remained unmoved. The blood-red blade on his finger became more and more dangerous, and the red light in his eyes became brighter. "I wonder if you'll die first, or me?" Yang Kai looked at Wei Xuan with interest. A strange smile appeared on his face as he slowly exerted more force on his fingers. A trace of dark red blood seeped out from Wei Xuan's chest. Wei Xuan's face paled, and he couldn't help but groan. The moment his body was injured, he felt a hot yuan qi enter his body, burning his flesh painfully. "You dare?" Wei Xuan looked at Yang Kai in disbelief. He had never thought that there would actually be someone in High Heaven Pavilion who dared to hurt him. "Whether I dare or not, I've already done it. Do you think I dare or not?" Yang Kai continued to exert more force. The blade penetrated 1/2 inch, causing blood to flow out. Wei Xuan's body suddenly trembled. He put on a strong front and said, "You're not afraid my grandfather will kill you? Disciples of the sect are only comparing notes. Life and death is their own responsibility." Yang Kai coldly snorted, "You're not as good as others. If you die, you can't blame anyone. So what if he's the first elder? Sky Tower doesn't belong to him." Wei Xuan was frightened. He looked at the crazy fellow disciple in front of him. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart, and his whole body turned cold. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Yang Kai suddenly interrupted him. Before you can say the 2 words admit defeat, I will kill you. You better not think about it. Wei Xuan's face turned pale. He really did want to admit defeat. When disciples of the same sect were comparing notes, once one side felt that their strength was not enough, they could admit defeat. The other side could not continue to attack. But now he didn't dare to say those 2 words. He didn't see any trace of a joking expression in his opponent's eyes. They were extremely serious. What do you want? Wei Xuan clenched his teeth and asked, Nothing. I just feel that you're not as good as Sassafras. The only reason you could win against him was because of your secret artifact. Yang Kai slowly shook his head. I'm not as good as him. Wei Xuan was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He roared in a low voice. How am I not as good as him? My strength is higher than his, and my background is better than his. How am I not as good as him? Yang Kai tilted his head and sized him up. You don't believe me? Let me show you. After he finished speaking, his fingers suddenly exerted more force. Wei Xuan couldn't help but let out a low roar. His face turned as white as gold, and his body staggered. Yang Kai slowly turned his head and sized up the group of Wei Xuan's subordinates. Just now they were fighting to the death with Li Yun Tian and the others. But after Wei Xuan was suppressed, they didn't dare to make any moves. At this moment, they were all staring blankly at Wei Xuan. You want to save your young master Wei Xuan? Yang Kai raised his voice and asked. No one dared to answer. Everyone was shocked by Yang Kai's craziness. The people present were all teenagers. When had they ever seen such a cruel scene? If you want to save him, then obediently kneel down and kowtow to me. If I'm in a good mood, I'll spare his life. Yang Kai said coldly. The group of people's faces turned white. Weren't these the words that Wei Xuan had said to Sassafras's subordinates? When Sassafras's subordinates heard these words, they didn't hesitate to kneel on the ground and kowtow to Wei Xuan. Were they going to follow in their footsteps? There were so many people watching. If they really kneeled down, they would lose all face. How would they have the face to stay in Sky Tower Pavilion in the future? But if they didn't kneel, what would they do if Wei Xuan blamed them? The group of people had different expressions. Hundreds of thoughts ran through their minds. Some of them couldn't make up their minds. You all want him to die. Yang Kai lightly sighed. The blade on his fingertips moved a bit deeper into Wei Xuan's body. Wei Xuan was scared, out of his wits. He could clearly feel that if the blade in Yang Kai's hand moved a bit deeper, it would directly pierce his heart. That was a fatal attack. Wei Xuan didn't want to die. His whole body was drenched in sweat. He shouted at his subordinates, What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and kneel down. If I die, none of you will live. His subordinates trembled and hurriedly kneeled on the ground. Li Yun Tian and the others were overwhelmed with emotions. The anger they had just suffered seemed to have disappeared with this kneel. It was indescribable how carefree they were. Yang Kai turned his head to look at Wei Xuan and lightly said, Now do you know the difference between you and Sassafras? When Wei Xuan heard this, his face froze. Soon after, his expression changed, and he resentfully swept his gaze over his subordinates. In order to save Sassafras's life, Li Yun Tian and the others were willing to be humiliated. But what about his subordinates? They had no choice but to shout out and threaten them with their lives. Only then did they reluctantly agree to Yang Kai's request. Comparing the two, the difference between Wei Xuan and Sassafras was obvious. In terms of charisma, Wei Xuan was indeed not as good as Sassafras. Are you satisfied now? Wei Xuan forcefully raised his spirits and coldly looked at Yang Kai. Yang Kai narrowed his eyes. His expression was uncertain. Wei Xuan was shocked and said in a trembling voice, You can't be. But before Yang Kai could answer, A roar came from afar. Everyone stop! Chapter 68. Just as the voice rang out, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yang Kai. Without any explanation, this person's palm landed on Yang Kai's shoulder. With an unparalleled strength, Yang Kai let out a groan and was sent flying. Brother Yang, Li Yuntian, and the others turned pale with fright. They hurried forward to support Yang Kai. Yang Kai struggled to get up. He lightly coughed while sizing up the newcomer. He saw a youth standing next to Wei Zhuan. His expression was dark as he stared at him. With one hand supporting the staggering Wei Zhuan, he asked, "Young Master Zhuan, are you all right?" Wei Zhuan resentfully glared at Yang Kai. His body staggered as he shook his head. "I'm fine." "It's good that you're fine. I came late." The youth couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Although his strength was higher than Wei Zhuan's, he was still a subordinate of the first elder. In terms of status, he couldn't compare to Wei Zhuan. "You're not too late." Wei Zhuan sneered and asked in a strange voice, "Brother Chao, as a disciple of the disciplinary hall, you should know the rules of the sect like the back of your hand. Let me ask you, if someone dares to commit murder within the sect, what is the punishment?" Chao Zheng, Wen's expression turned cold as he firmly said, "Depending on the severity of the case, the light punishment is breaking the hands and feet and expelling the offender from the Sky Tower Pavilion. The heavy punishment is killing the offender on the spot as a warning to others." Wei Zhuan laughed and pointed at Yang Kai. "Just now, this person tried to kill me. Brother Chao, you decide what to do." With someone backing him up, how could Wei Zhuan compromise like before? Chao Zhengwen sternly shouted, "Is this true?" Wei Zhuan sneered. "When Brother Chao came, didn't you see everything?" Chao Zhengwen nodded. "That's right. Just now, this disciple really did hold a weapon against young Master Zhuan's chest. If I didn't stop him in time, young Master Zhuan would have been killed. This person is really daring. He dares to commit such a crime in broad daylight." The two of them sang the same tune and cooperated seamlessly. In a flash, they pinned the crime of murder on Yang Kai. "Bullshit!" Li Yuntian roared. "Just now, Brother Yang and Wei Zhuan were only sparring. How could it be as serious as you say? What are you trying to do by distorting the truth?" Chao Zhenwen snorted. "Is it really that simple?" Zhao Hu said, "If you don't believe me, you can ask the brothers who are here to watch the show. We can all testify. Moreover, this matter was started by Wei Zhuang. Brother Yang was only dragged into it." "Someone will testify. Who will testify?" Wei Zhuan tilted his head and sneered as he looked around. Many of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples who had gathered to watch the fun suddenly scattered like birds and beasts, quickly fleeing the scene. They had all heard of the pavilion's elder struggle, so they naturally didn't have the courage to intervene. No matter which side they offended, their future days in High Heaven Pavilion wouldn't be good. When Li Yuntian saw this scene, he couldn't help but grit his teeth in anger, but he still straightened his neck and said, "We participated in the entire process. We know every detail clearly. We are the witnesses." Chao Zhenwen shook his head. "You gathered a crowd to fight, so you are guilty. How can you testify?" "Gathered a crowd to fight?" Zhao Hu jumped up and roared. It was clearly Wei Zhuang who asked his subordinates to challenge us. "Where did this come from?" Chao Zhenwen, don't think that just because you are a disciplinary disciple you can do whatever you want. High Heaven Pavilion is not for you to decide. "How dare you?" Chao Zhenwen rebuked. "The disciplinary hall represents High Heaven Pavilion's rules. It has always been fair and just. You dare to question the disciplinary hall's authority? Your crime is even worse. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext." Yang Kai waved his hand to stop Li Yuntian and the others from arguing. Looking at Chao Zhenwen, he sneered. "Fair and just? Today I have seen what is called fair and just." "Humph!" Chao Zhenwen sneered and shouted. Arrest all of them. After the Elder Council's discussion, they will be dealt with. So. A series of clothes flapping sounds came from all directions. More than 10 disciplinary hall disciples rushed out from all directions. Even the weakest among them was at the initial element boundary 5th stage. How could Li Yuntian and the others be a match for them? In just a few moments, they were all pinned to the ground and restrained. Yang Kai didn't resist because he knew that it would be useless even if he did. Let's wait and see. Wei Zhuang was a petty person who got what he wanted. He walked in front of Yang Kai and sneered at him. Take them away, Qiao Zhenwen ordered. The disciplinary hall disciples took Li Yuntian and the others away. Looking at the unconscious sassafras on the ground, Qiao Zhenwen frowned. He didn't care about Yang Kai and Li Yuntian, but Sassafras's identity was special. He didn't have the guts to touch him. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Send junior brother to the second elder." Yes, someone answered and picked up Sassafras from the ground and hurriedly left. Young Master Zhuang, you've suffered, Qiao Zhenwen said softly. Wei Zhuang narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth that Yang Kai, I definitely can't let him go. He humiliated me today. If I don't take revenge, I won't be a man. You should know what to do. Qiao Zhenwen hesitated. Young Master Zhuang, today's matter is a bit big. It will definitely alarm the elders. If we make a move now, I'm afraid it won't be good. Why don't we wait for the elders to make a decision before making a move? But I can't take this lying down, Wei Zhuang said with a ferocious expression. Don't worry, I'll help you teach him a lesson. I'll let him know the consequences of offending you. Don't beat him to death. I want to end him with my own hands. As you wish. In High Heaven Pavilion's forest prison, Yang Kai and his group were all imprisoned here. The forest prison was dark and damp, the temperature was very cold, and there were rats and mosquitoes everywhere. Waves of nauseating stench rushed in from all directions. The environment was extremely bad. The forest prison was the place where Sky Tower imprisoned disciples who made mistakes. Li Yuntian and the others never thought that they would one day be imprisoned here. Each and every one of them had a bad taste in their mouths. Brother Yang, this time we've implicated you. Li Yuntian sat next to Yang Kai and softly apologized. Yang Kai smiled. This isn't your fault. I couldn't help but jump out. I can't bear to see my own family fighting each other. Fighting each other? Li Yuntian almost choked. Didn't these words also include us? To put it nicely, it's called fighting each other. To put it bluntly, isn't it fighting each other? Yang Kai chuckled. That's true. But Brother Yang, don't worry. Young Master Su won't ignore us. We only need to wait here for a few hours, and young Master Su will be able to rescue us. Li Yuntian's thoughts were relatively simple. Yang Kai turned his body and assumed a more comfortable position. Tell me, why is there a rift between the Great Elder and the Second Elder? Li Yuntian heard this and sighed. This is related to our sect leader. Oh, I'd like to hear the details. Oh, Li Yuntian said. Last time, young Master Su also told you about the sect leader's 2 disciples. Ever since the sect leader left the mountain to capture the second disciple and banish him to the coiling dragon stream, our sect leader rarely appears in front of others. He doesn't even pay attention to the matters of the Sky Tower. These past few years, the Great Elder has been acting as the sect leader. Maybe it's because he's been here for a long time that he's become more ambitious. The Great Elder now truly considers himself the sect leader. The Second Elder doesn't like this and thinks that the Great Elder often oversteps his boundaries. Over time, there will naturally be friction. Chapter 69. In the current Sky Tower Pavilion, the Great Elder, 4th Elder, and 5th Elder have allied together. The Great Elder is the leader, while the 2nd Elder and 3rd Elder belong to another faction. The former wants to replace the sect leader, while the latter wants to protect the sect leader. It's just that the Great Elder's faction is a bit stronger. The Second Elder and Third Elder have suffered many losses in the past few years. Hearing Li Yuntian's words, Yang Kai immediately understood. If the elders don't get along, then the younger generation will naturally fight as well. The conflict between Sassafras and Wei Zhuan probably came about because of this. Zhao Hu sneered. It's just that when the tiger doesn't come out of the mountain, the monkey is the king. If the sect leader really disappear, then who are the Great Elder? And the others? Li Yuntian stared at Zhao Hu and said, "Don't talk behind our backs. We younger generation disciples shouldn't speak ill of our elders, even if we don't like their methods." Zhao Hu stuck out his tongue and said softly, "Isn't that what you think too?" Li Yuntian said, "But I won't say it." In the contribution hall, Xianing Chang hurriedly rushed in. Old man Meng looked at her with a smile and said, "Disciple, you've come to see your master again today? And this old man is very happy to see you so filial." Xianing Chang anxiously said, "Master, something bad has happened." "What happened?" Meng Wuya was a bit puzzled. He had never seen his disciples so flustered before. Xianing Chang quickly told him about the conflict between Yang Kai and Wei Zhuan today. After hearing this, Meng Wuya's face became gloomy. "You're saying that Yang Kai has already reached the initial element boundary third stage? And he even defeated Wei Zhuan?" "Yes." Xianing Chang repeatedly nodded. She thought to herself, "I was the one who helped him break through." It seems that his last fortuitous encounter in the Black Wind Mountain was not small. His cultivation speed is very fast. Meng Wuya was slightly surprised. "Master, don't be so emotional. You should quickly think of a way to save him," Xianing Chang said anxiously. Hearing this, Meng Wuya stared blankly at his disciple. With a strange expression, he asked, "Disciple, why are you so nervous?" Xianing Chang was stunned and stammered, "Do I?" "Yes, you are very nervous now." Meng Wuya nodded. His disciple was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. No one knew her better than he did. Over the years, it wasn't as if there weren't any outstanding male disciples who had pursued her, but her attitude towards them had always been one of respect and respect. Today, however, she had actually asked for help for someone who was only at the initial element boundary third stage. Obviously, this wasn't normal, Xianing Chang said. "I just don't want his path of cultivation to be stifled just as it has begun to take shape." "Are you very familiar with him?" Meng Wuya immediately became vigilant. "No, but I've been observing him for 2 years." "Master, you also know that I'm on duty in the Dark Hall. I'm responsible for the territory where he lives." Xianing Chang told the truth, then begged again, "Master, please think of a way to save him. This time, he has offended the Great Elder. Without the help of an expert, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape this calamity. The Second Elder may not necessarily care about his life or death." "Master, you are that expert." Meng Wuya's face was full of enjoyment. Flattery always worked, not to mention it was his own precious disciple who was flattering him. After feeling proud for a while, Meng Wuya frowned. "Disciple, this matter is not something Master can intervene in. You see, this is after all High Heaven Pavilion's internal affairs. This old master is just a caretaker. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to intervene." This was the truth. Although he had a good impression of Yang Kai as an outsider, how could he have the nerve to intervene in High Heaven Pavilion's affairs? Xianing Chang didn't answer. She just stared at Meng Wuya with a pair of watery eyes. Although there was a veil covering her face, Meng Wuya could still see her angry little face. Meng Wuya couldn't stand this kind of look, so he immediately put on a bitter face. Hey, my little grand, and don't be so stubborn. Even if this old master doesn't intervene, the Second Elder will definitely make arrangements. This time, Yang Kai was involved because of Sassafras. If the second elder doesn't intervene, how will he win over people's hearts in the future? What if? Xia Ning Chong asked angrily. There shouldn't be any what if. Meng Wuya was also a bit uncertain. After all, when the upper echelons fought, sacrificing one or two disciples was a very common thing. Humph! Xia Ning Chong turned around and sat down on a chair next to him. She said sullenly, Master, if you don't help him, then I won't be able to go to the 9th Yin congregation ground. I'm afraid your disciple's strength will stop there for the rest of his life. Ew. Hearing this, Meng Wuya turned pale with fright. He ran out from behind the counter and stood in front of Xia Ning Chong. He lowered his posture like he was serving a grand. And where did this come from? Xia Ning Chong turned her head and didn't say anything. Meng Wuya quickly turned around and walked in front of Xia Ning Chong again. Tell me, why can't you go there if you don't help him? In any case, if you don't care about his life or death, then you don't need to care about my life or death either. Master, you are such a heartless person. These words were like a sharp arrow that shot straight at Meng Wuya's heart. It was like he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled, and his little heart broke into countless pieces. Grandaunt, my grand, can't we talk nicely? These old bones of mine can't stand you tormenting me like this. Meng Wuya bowed again and again. He was extremely humble. How was this the attitude toward a disciple? This was clearly the attitude toward an ancestor. Xia Ning Chong turned her head and stared at Meng Wuya. She said softly, He cultivates a yang attribute martial skill, and the yang qi in his body is incomparably pure. Yang attribute yuan qi? Meng Wuya's expression was dignified. To what extent is it pure? It's 5 times purer than the person you found last time. Xia Ning Chong replied. You tested it? Meng Wuya couldn't wait to confirm. Yes. If that's the case, then nothing can happen to him. Meng Wuya suddenly straightened his back. After thinking for a moment, he walked out. When he reached the door, he paused and looked back at Xia Ning Chong. He asked, Disciple, do you dislike him? No. Xia Ning Chong slowly shook her head. Then you like him? It's not that I like him. I just don't dislike him. Xia Ning Chang's face turned red. Good. You know what you have to do if you want to go there, but you have to promise me that you won't be tempted by him. Only then will I go save him. Master, what are you saying? Xia Ning Chong was very embarrassed. I haven't even spoken to him. These words made Xia Ning Chong feel very guilty. She couldn't help but recall the awkwardness of last night. It's not that I want to cut off your love, but this kind of small place is not a place for you. There's no one here that you can fall in love with. Sooner or later, you'll reach a height that no one can reach. At that time, you will live for hundreds of years or even thousands of years, while the person you love will slowly die of old age in front of you. I don't want you to suffer that kind of pain. Disciple, you have to remember, the peak of martial arts is loneliness, and loneliness. Chapter 70. Meng Wuya's words were said with a sigh, as if he was speaking from his heart. Xia Ning Chong could naturally hear the grief in his words. Could it be that Master had experienced this kind of thing? Just as he was about to ask, Meng Wuya had already disappeared. At the same time, in Black Wind Trade, in front of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples' wooden house, a sweaty young man hurriedly ran over. Standing in front of the door, he gently knocked and calmed his breathing before softly calling out, Senior Sister Sue, what's the matter? A cold voice came from inside. The voice was very pleasant to hear, but it carried a kind of coldness that repelled people thousands of miles away. The sweat on the young man's body almost condensed into ice. Shivering, he said, Young Master Sassafras has been knocked unconscious. His subordinates have also been arrested by the law enforcement hall and locked up in the forest prison. As soon as his voice fell, the door of the wooden house suddenly opened. and a white-clothed Su Yan appeared in front of him. The man quickly retreated 2 steps and lowered his head, not daring to look directly at Su Yan's flawless face. "Speak clearly, what happened?" Su Yan lightly asked, but the whole wooden house was emitting a burst of cold air visible to the naked eye. Cracking sounds could be heard from the ground, the sound of ice forming. The young man quickly made a long story short and told the whole story. After he finished, he waited for a long time, but there was no movement from the other side. He couldn't help but whisper, "Senior Sister Su?" After calling out, there was still no response. The man gathered his courage and quietly looked up, but there was no trace of Su Yan. She had already left at some point. "Oh my God!" The High Heaven Pavilion disciple almost collapsed and fell to the ground. This Senior Sister Su was too cold. In the future, whoever married her would have to sleep under a quilt on a hot day. However, for such a cold and noble person like Senior Sister Su, there was no man in the world who could match up to her, right? No one would have thought that just a small conflict between High Heaven Pavilion's younger generation disciples would cause such a stir and stir up so many heroes. In the High Heaven Pavilion's forest prison, Yang Kai, Li Yuntian, and the others were still imprisoned. It had already been more than an hour since they were captured, but there was still no movement outside. Li Yuntian and the rest were anxious. They didn't know why Sassafras hadn't made a move yet. But on second thought, Sassafras had been knocked unconscious at that time, and he didn't know if he had woken up yet. If he hadn't woken up, there was no way to rescue him. Just as he was worrying, the gate of the forest prison was suddenly opened. Along with the sound of footsteps, a disciple of the law enforcement hall came to the cell where Yang Kai and the others were imprisoned. After opening the door, he shouted, "Who is Yang Kai?" Yang Kai answered in a deep voice, "I am." "Come with me." The disciple of the law enforcement hall impolitely ordered, "Someone wants to see you." Yang Kai's face darkened. He sneered, but he wasn't afraid. He walked out. "Brother Yang, don't go out. Wait for young Master Su to come and save us." Li Yuntian was alarmed and pulled on Yang Kai. "Let go." The disciple of the law enforcement hall angrily shouted, "Whoever dares to stop him is an enemy of the law enforcement hall. You know the consequences." Yang Kai said to Li Yuntian, "I'll go take a look." "Don't worry." Li Yuntian helplessly let go and said in a deep voice, "Brother Yang, be careful." "Humph." The disciple of the law enforcement hall sneered. "You overestimate yourself." Walking out of the cell, the disciple locked the gate and then led Yang Kai outside. Not long after, they arrived in front of a room. The disciple opened the door and said with a strange smile, "Please come in." Yang Kai turned his head and looked at him. He also sneered and stepped in. The disciple of the law enforcement hall followed closely behind and closed the door with a bang. Almost as soon as the door was closed, Yang Kai suddenly turned around and slammed his palm on the chest of the disciple who led him in. Burning hot true Yang Yuan qi poured into the disciple's body. The disciple immediately screamed and was pushed into the wall. He never thought that Yang Kai would dare to attack him. This time, he took the full brunt of Yang Kai's attack and almost couldn't catch his breath. "You have big dog guts." An angry shout came from inside the room. Immediately, 3 or 4 figures danced and pounced on Yang Kai. Yang Kai only had time to block one of the attacks. In the next moment, he was knocked to the ground, followed by a series of punches and kicks. In the chaos, Yang Kai roared. Blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. The sweet taste of blood made Yang Kai excited. His blood boiled. At this moment, true Yang Yuan qi was flowing in his meridians at an incredible speed. The burning heat seeped out of his bones and spread throughout his body. Yang Kai's skin became fiery red. This time, the energy coming from his bones seemed to be much stronger than before. Roar! Yang Kai, who was being besieged, suddenly leapt up into the air. While in midair, he kicked out with his legs, hitting the heads of 2 law enforcement hall disciples. Accompanied by 2 screams, the 2 stumbled backwards. But before Kai Yong could land on the ground, a person appeared from the side and accurately grabbed his ankle. With a fierce fling, Kai Yong was flung into the wall like a ragged sack. Groaning, his internal organs were all turned upside down. Struggling to get up, Yong Kai wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Under the dim light of the room, he was able to clearly see the situation in the room. This was a sealed secret room. There were 5 disciples of the law enforcement hall. According to the yuan qi fluctuations from the fight just now, Yong Kai estimated that their strength was around the initial element boundary. The one who threw him out had a violent yuan qi, which was the sign that he had already entered the qi transformation stage. 1 against 5. Moreover, the gap between their realms was quite large. This battle was destined to be a one-sided battle. But Yong Kai was smiling. In this adversity, Yong Kai's fighting spirit was surging fiercely. You dare to take the initiative to injure others? The Qi transformation stage disciples shouted coldly. Your courage is not small. The other 4 stood behind him, staring coldly at Yong Kai. They had received orders from Chao Zheng when to teach Yong Kai a good lesson, as long as they did not kill him. They did not expect that just as they entered the room, Yong Kai would actually take the initiative to attack, catching them off guard and causing them to lose face. Ha. Yong Kai leaned against the wall with his head slightly lowered. His scarlet eyes looked at the 5 people and said coldly, You want to hit me? Do you think I can't retaliate? The Qi transformation stage disciple's face darkened. He laughed sinisterly. You are quite smart. Since you know what we are thinking, then don't retaliate. Obediently let us beat you up so that young Master Wei Zhuan can vent his anger. If you dare to retaliate, you may lose an arm or a leg. You can try. Yong Kai looked at him coldly. Stubborn fool. Beat him up. Under the order, the 5 people moved out again. Their moves were ruthless, not showing the slightest mercy. With their strength, it was more than enough to deal with Yong Kai one-on-one. Now that the 5 of them were attacking together, it was naturally easy to teach Yong Kai a lesson, to be continued. Chapter 71. The secret room was suddenly thrown into chaos. Angry roars and the sound of punches and kicks were incessant. Occasionally, 1 or 2 groans could be heard, and blood splattered everywhere. As the saying goes, it is difficult for 2 fists to fight 4 hands. Yong Kai's strength was already lacking compared to these people. Now that he was fighting 1 against 5, how could he protect himself? Often when he fought with others, he would have to endure 4 or 5 attacks. These disciplinary disciples were even more ruthless. Although they wouldn't take Yong Kai's life, after suffering such a beating, anyone would have to lie in bed for at least 1 to 2 months. Stop! After a long while, the Qi transforming stage disciplinary disciple suddenly shouted and quickly jumped out of the ring. Stop fighting. If you continue, you will kill him. The other 4 people also hurriedly retreated. They stared at Yong Kai, who was lying on the ground, with some fear in their eyes. Fuck. One of them covered his cheek. I was slapped by him. My teeth almost fell out. The other man covered his crotch with a look of lingering fear. I almost lost my bloodline. If I didn't dodge fast enough, the first one to lie down would have been me. Even if he avoided his vital parts, he still felt a burning pain in his thigh. Yong Kai struggled to resist the powerful kick. Even now, when he thought about it, he still felt a chill in his heart. The 5 of them looked at each other, all of them stunned, because although they had managed to defeat Kai Yong in this battle, each of them had more or less been left with some scars on their bodies. This discovery shocked the 5 people. The 5 people's faces suddenly became embarrassed. Wasn't this too embarrassing? How could a trial disciple, who was only at the 3rd level of the initial element realm, be so cruel? When they were ganging up on him, they didn't care much about it. Now that they thought about it, they found it inconceivable. Pooh! A sound came. The 5 people followed the sound and saw that Yong Kai, who should have been paralyzed on the ground, actually stood up shakily and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flickered between light and darkness, constantly changing. There was a faint red light shining, and a scorching hot feeling rushed toward him, as if a volcano that had been dormant for thousands of years had finally erupted. This Yuan Qi fluctuation, the Qi transformation stage, disciple was shocked. Something is wrong. How could this be the Yuan Qi fluctuation of a third stage initial element realm disciple? It was obvious that he had already reached the peak of the initial element stage. If he took another step forward, he would most likely reach the Qi transformation stage. He can still stand up. The person next to him opened his eyes wide and almost bit his own tongue. Even if it was him, if he was beaten up like this, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the strength to move a finger. How could he stand up? He's here. Another person suddenly screamed. Before he could finish his words, the originally trembling Yong Kai suddenly rushed towards the 5 people like a gust of wind. Halfway through, Yong Kai's fist became fiery red, like a soldering iron that had been fished out from a charcoal fire. The person who shouted used all the Yuan Qi in his body and fiercely exchanged a punch with Yong Kai. Boom! The person flew backwards and hit the wall before falling to the ground. He felt something sweet in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. Yong Kai's body slightly paused, but he had already found his second target. Presumptuous! The Qi transformation stage disciple leader was furious. His 5 brothers were fighting against a junior brother. Not only were they unable to defeat him, but they were also counterattacked. If this spread out, what kind of scandal would this be? Where were they supposed to put their faces? In his anger, the Qi transformation stage disciple pushed out his palm and shouted in a deep voice, "Whirling wind force." The room was suddenly filled with a whistling sound. From the palm of this person, a small tornado visible to the naked eye burst out, directly meeting Yong Kai's fist. Kacha, kacha, a series of cracking sounds were heard. The clothes on Yong Kai's arm seemed to have been cut by countless blades, instantly becoming tattered. His entire arm was also covered with bloodstains. Yong Kai's crimson eyes revealed a shocked expression. His true Yang Yuan Qi moved, fiercely gushing out from his arm, blocking the opponent's martial skill. With a whoosh, a ball of fire exploded in the secret chamber. Yong Kai's true Yang Yuan Qi merged with the Qi transforming stage disciple's whirlwind energy and ignited it. Amidst the flames, Yong Kai's fist flew out and collided with the palm of the Qi transforming stage disciple. Both sides were forced to retreat. What are you waiting for? Beat him up. The Qi transforming stage disciple's palm turned red. He had never thought that the opponent's Yuan Qi would be so strange. Although it did not injure him, he had still suffered some losses. Enraged, he immediately roared. The other 3 disciplinary hall disciples recovered from their shock. They rushed forward and surrounded Yong Kai. Using all of their skills, they began to beat up Yong Kai. The other man, who was the first to be sent flying by Yong Kai, also joined in angrily. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the 4 people gradually stopped. While gasping for breath, they retreated a few feet away from Yong Kai. They were almost an entire room away from him as they vigilantly sized him up. They were really shocked by this junior brother's craziness. The second time they ganged up on him, the results were obvious. Yong Kai's injuries were several times more serious than the previous ones, but the 4 people also paid a different price. He won't get up again, right? One of them covered his mouth and coughed as he softly asked. After coughing, there was a pool of blood in his hand. He shouldn't. He was already beaten to this extent. Another person rubbed his eyes. There was a bruise there, and even a big blister, as if he had been scalded by boiling water. The 5 people felt bitter in their hearts. They felt that they had suffered such a big loss because of the drain. In this small secret room, 5 people against one person seemed to have the advantage, but in reality, it was very difficult for them to attack at the same time. But the opponent didn't have so many scruples. There were enemies everywhere, so he could fight as he pleased. If they were in the wilderness and could use all of their strength, why would they be in such an awkward situation? But this junior brother called Yong Kai's strength was really amazing. A normal initial element boundary third level was simply not his opponent. No wonder Wei Xuan was defeated by him. Just when the 5 people thought that Yong Kai had been beaten to the ground, he unexpectedly moved again. He was extremely weak and battered, but little by little he straightened his body. The yuan qi fluctuations emitted from his body not only did not weaken, but also surged. Damn it! The qi transformation stage, disciple cursed. What kind of freak was this junior brother? Why didn't he faint after being beaten like this? Don't come over. If you do, I'll really beat you to death. The person with the bruise on his eye shouted. This was an extremely comical scene. The people who were beating the other person huddled together and shouted for the one who was beaten to not come over. On the contrary, the one who was beaten seemed to be in a daze. His whole body was covered in blood, and he was moving step by step towards the 5 people. Every step he took was heavy, and every step he took was shaky, as if he would fall at any moment, but he still continued to walk forward. If it weren't for the wall behind them, the 5 people would have retreated. To be continued. Chapter 72. A series of gulping sounds could be heard. Brother, what should we do? One of them nervously asked. He was afraid that if they continued to beat this Yong Kai to death, this is a fucking madman. The Qi transforming stage disciple's eyes slightly trembled as he cursed. I don't care. If he dares to come over, then we'll beat him. This time we must knock him out. Okay, the other 4 awkwardly replied. Just as the 5 of them were on high alert, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of their hearts, causing the temperature of the entire room to drop by a lot. Cracking sounds could be heard from all directions, causing the 5 of them to turn their heads in amazement. They saw that the walls and floor of the room were covered with a thin layer of frost. What's going on? One of them doubtfully asked as he shivered. Bang! The door to the secret room was kicked open by someone. Who is it? The Qi transforming stage law enforcement disciple shouted and turned his head to look. His mouth suddenly opened to the size of a duck's egg, and he couldn't close it no matter how hard he tried. Although the temperature of the room had dropped to the point where it was as cold as winter, a thin layer of cold sweat suddenly appeared on this person's forehead. He stared blankly at the woman who appeared at the door and stammered. Sue. Senior Sister Su Yen. Senior Sister Su Yen? The other 4 people's faces also changed greatly as they followed his gaze. Sure enough, they saw a beautiful woman with a cold expression and wearing a pure white dress standing there. She was like a pure white snow lotus blooming on a snowy mountain that had never melted since ancient times. She brought a chill with her as she descended to the world. She was so noble, so cold. Wherever her beautiful eyes swept past, the 5 of them felt a sense of inferiority. They all unconsciously lowered their heads. Su Yen had just hurriedly returned from Black Wind trade, so she didn't have time to investigate the situation. She only thought that Sassafras had also been taken into the forest prison. After rushing in, she noticed that there were traces of a battle and immediately came to investigate. After opening the door, what she saw made her heart tremble. There were 6 people in the room. 5 of them were law enforcement disciples. One was at the second stage of the Qi transforming stage, while the other 4 were at the initial element boundary. The last one was covered in blood, and his clothes were tattered. He stood there unsteadily, but his eyes were filled with an unyielding will. I've seen this person before. Yong Kai. Once, Sassafras had brought him to Black Wind Trade. He was the disciple who had defeated Cheng Xiaofeng. Using her divine sense to investigate, Su Yan was even more surprised. She could clearly sense that this young Kai was covered in wounds. Although these wounds weren't life-threatening, with his strength, it was absolutely impossible for him to still be standing. He should have been lying on the ground by now. Just how tenacious was his will to be able to withstand such a heavy blow without collapsing? In just a few moments, Su Yan already knew everything that had happened in this room. For the first time, a nameless fire rose in his heart, which was rarely stirred up. In a flash, Su Yan arrived at Yang Kai's side. Supporting him with one hand, she poured her ice-cold yuan qi into his body and controlled his internal and external injuries. Strangely enough, after being stimulated by this ice-cold feeling, Yang Kai's tumbling blood quickly calmed down. His drowsy mind also immediately cleared up. A clear fragrance lingered at the tip of his nose. Yang Kai turned his head to look at Su Yan, who was standing beside him. His ferocious face gradually calmed down. This senior sister wasn't very tall. She was half a head shorter than him, but at this moment, Yang Kai felt a kind of tranquility that he had never felt before. It was as if he was in an empty snowy mountain. There was only a refreshing coolness, and all the noise in the world had disappeared. With her by his side, Yang Kai couldn't help but feel an urge to join hands with her and live in seclusion in the mountains. Who did it? Su Yan's indifferent and cold voice sounded. The 5 people from the disciplinary hall trembled. They looked at each other, then lowered their heads and said, "Everyone did it." In front of Su Yan, it was as if even lying was blasphemy. Her noble and inviolable temperament and majesty made them not dare to lie. Su Yan nodded slightly. "Very good." After saying this, she supported Yang Kai and turned around, leaving the secret room step by step. Only after Su Yan's figure disappeared did the 5 people let out a heavy sigh of relief, feeling as if they had just survived a disaster. But before the 5 people could rejoice, they suddenly felt a chill on their chests. Looking down, they saw that there was a little bit of frost on their chests. Then, this frost quickly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into an ice flower half the size of a palm. With a hua sound, the 5 ice flowers shattered at the same time. The 5 people groaned and knelt on the ground with pale faces. They only felt that their yuan qi had disappeared along with the explosion of the ice flowers. Moreover, their bodies had also suffered heavy injuries. So strong, worthy of being the number 1 person of the 3 sects, the Qi transforming stage disciplinary hall disciple's face was pale. He was shivering from the cold, and his face was filled with lingering fear. He didn't see when Su Yan had made her move, but he had unknowingly been hit by her attack. If it wasn't for this senior sister's calm temperament, today's situation wouldn't have been as simple as just a few injuries. With her strength, if she wanted to take their lives, it would be as easy as pinching a conch with her 10 fingers. Outside the secret room, Yang Kai was still staggering forward. Hearing the movement behind him, he turned his head and looked at Su Yan in astonishment. "You made a move on them?" Su Yan blinked her long eyelashes. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Yang Kai nodded. "Oh, right, bring Li Yuntian and the others out, too." "What about Sassafras?" Su Yan asked. "I don't know." Yang Kai slowly shook his head. He wasn't imprisoned. He should have been sent back. Those people wouldn't dare to touch Sassafras. Hearing this, Su Yan let out a sigh of relief. The 2 of them walked into the depths of the forest prison. Not long after, they arrived at the place where Li Yuntian and the others were imprisoned. Seeing Yang Kai and Su Yan appear together, and being so intimate, they were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They even forgot to breathe. Heavens! If I could be so intimate with Senior Sister Su, I would be willing to be beaten to death. Li Yuntian and the others were so envious that they wanted to die. "Come out!" Su Yan waved her hand and broke the lock on the cell door. "Oh," the group of people unconsciously responded, and then walked out in a daze. More than 10 pairs of eyes kept looking at Yang Kai and Su Yan. No matter how calm Su Yan's temperament was, being stared at like this, her expression became unnatural. "Come, I'll take you out." Su Yan's pretty face was cold as she supported Yang Kai and walked in front. Li Yuntian and the others followed behind. Not long after, the group of people walked out of the forest prison. The bright light shone in, causing everyone to squint their eyes. However, outside the forest prison, nearly 100 disciplinary hall disciples were waiting in formation, surrounding the exit. "What a big lineup," Yang Kai sneered. "Senior sister, I'm afraid this is used to deal with you, right?" Su Yan didn't answer. She just faintly glanced at the crowd and continued to support Yang Kai as they walked forward. Wherever they passed, no one dared to block them. All the disciplinary hall disciples who blocked the way scattered in fear and took the initiative to open a path. Chapter 73. Pairs of eyes stared at Su Yan and Yang Kai, who she was supporting. All kinds of envy and jealousy quickly spread, and a strong sour smell rose up. Before today, they had never seen Su Yan so close to a man. Even the several outstanding core disciples had never received such an honor. Su Yan cultivated the ice heart secret art, and her heart had been sealed in ice for many years. Not to mention seeing her close to other men, it was rare for her to even speak. Every High Heaven Pavilion disciple, regardless of their strength, status, could only be cautious in front of her, lest they offend her. But at this moment, she actually took the initiative to support a young man at the initial element boundary third stage. Her jade-like, small hand slightly supporting his waist, her icy face slightly blushing, looking very attractive. The person who was usually unreachable at this moment seemed to be much closer to them. However, the hearts of countless High Heaven Pavilion male disciples were broken. They felt as if the high and mighty goddess in their hearts had been desecrated. And this person who had profaned their goddess was right in front of them, being supported by their goddess, smelling their goddess's fragrance, feeling the softness of their goddess's small hand, and enjoying a treatment that no one else could enjoy. Murderous Chi. Yang Kai's mouth curved into a strange smile, his expression calm as he followed Su Yan forward, giving off the feeling of a fox exploiting a tiger's might. In front of them, a figure flashed. A handsome young man stood in front of Su Yan and Kai Yang. This person looked at Su Yan with a pair of eyes that were filled with tenderness and sweetness, but also concealed a trace of deep jealousy and unhappiness. Su Yan's footsteps paused, and she looked up at the other party. "Get out of the way." As always, a cold voice sounded. Her voice was flat, without the slightest trace of anger, and no one could hear her emotions. The man smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Junior sister, don't make things difficult for brother. Brother is also doing his duty." This person was the second strongest of High Heaven Pavilion's younger generation, Xie Hongchen. "Get out of the way." Su Yan still said the same words, as if she was unwilling to say another word. Xie Hongchen helplessly said, "Junior sister, these people can't leave yet. They have violated the sect's rules. Before the Elder Council makes a decision, no one can take them out of here." "Sect rules?" Yang Kai took a step forward and sneered. "Brother, may I ask, which rule have we violated?" Xie Hongchen looked at him contemptuously and snorted. "Gang fighting, murder, contempt for the law enforcement hall. Any one of these is enough to get you expelled from High Heaven Pavilion." "Gang fight?" Su Yan continued. "Who are you fighting with? Since it was a gang fight, there should be opponents, right? Why did the law enforcement hall only arrest one of them? What about the other side?" Xie Hongchen's face stiffened as he was rendered speechless. The other side of the fight was Wei Zhuan, And the others? So how could they dare to catch them? Murder? Then where are the bodies of the people who were killed? Xia Hongchen smiled bitterly and hurriedly explained, attempted to commit murder, but fortunately our law enforcement hall stopped them, so there was no big trouble. When sect disciples spar, they are responsible for their own lives. According to what you said, every pair of disciples who spar with each other are attempting to commit murder? Your law enforcement hall has so many people. If you have nothing better to do, why don't you arrest all of High Heaven Pavilion's disciples? Su Yan's expression was indifferent, her tone cold. As for the contempt for the law enforcement hall, if your law enforcement hall is really fair, who would dare to despise it? I'm afraid that the law enforcement hall, which purports to represent the sect's rules, has long been reduced to a tool in the hands of some people in a power struggle. If you destroy your own dignity, you can't blame others for stepping on you. Junior sister. Xia Hongchen's smile was dry, his handsome face showing deep helplessness. Do you have to be so blunt? Right and wrong, you know clearly in your heart. Xia Hongchen's expression was sad as he whispered, Junior sister, I have treated you with sincerity. Why do you make things so difficult for me? Su Yan lightly said, if brother's words were heard by junior sister Zhao Fei Shui, I wonder what she would think. Zhao Fei Shui, like Xia Hongchen and Su Yan, was a core disciple of High Heaven Pavilion. However, the relationship between this woman and Xia Hongchen had always been unclear. Xia Hongchen's body trembled as he stared deeply at Su Yan, his face filled with pain and helplessness. Immediately, his eyes turned and stared at Yang Kai, his eyes suddenly filled with resentment. Yang Kai's expression was calm as he stared back at him without fear. You're called Yang Kai? Xia Hongchen suppressed the bitterness in his heart and asked, anyone who saw the woman they liked so intimately supporting another man would not feel good. What advice does brother have for me? I know this time's matter was caused by you. If it weren't for you, there wouldn't be this trouble. If you don't want to implicate junior sister Su, you should obediently return to your cell and save me the trouble of taking action. Xia Hongchen faintly said. He had no way to persuade Su Yan, nor did he dare to touch her, so he could only find an opening from Yang Kai. Yang Kai smiled. What are you smiling about? Xia Hongchen frowned and asked. Yang Kai was now covered in blood and looked quite embarrassed, but he was still smiling. While smiling, he slowly reached out and grabbed Su Yan's jade hand, which was resting on his waist, gently patting it. Turning his head to look at Su Yan, he said sweetly, I also don't want to implicate senior sister, but senior sister has always treated me with sincerity. I really can't let her down, so I can only let her do as she pleases. Xia Hongchen's face suddenly paled, while Su Yan stood in place, her pretty face filled with confusion. Li Yun Tian and the others' jaws dropped to the ground as strange gurgling sounds came from their throats. But no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't say a single word. The surrounding 100 or so disciplinary hall disciples felt as if their hearts had suddenly split open, each one dumbstruck. Senior sister, what do you say? Yang Kai seemed to be unaware of the critical situation and sprinkled a handful of salt into the boiling oil. Xia Hongchen nervously looked at Su Yan, afraid that she would give him an answer he didn't want to hear. Su Yan suddenly regained her senses. In all her life, she had never been so frivolous by a man. Her hand was actually held in his palm and caressed as he pleased. That rough hand rubbed against her skin, causing a burst of tingling pain and a bit of warmth. Su Yan was furious. She almost sent Yang Kai flying on the spot, but after thinking about it, she understood what Yang Kai wanted to do. Suppressing the anger in her heart, Su Yan nodded slightly and generously admitted yes. While answering, she sent a stream of dark qi into Yang Kai's meridians. Yang Kai groaned as 2 streams of blood suddenly flowed out from his nostrils. Why are you bleeding? Su Yan asked as she took out a white handkerchief and gently wiped Yang Kai's blood. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Kai Yang felt a chill in his heart, thinking that although this senior sister's temperament was calm and indifferent, in reality, if you crossed her bottom line, she would not hesitate to act ruthlessly. Xia Hongchun was about to go crazy from jealousy. If Su Yan had just admitted it, he wouldn't have believed it, but seeing the scene in front of him made it impossible for him to doubt Su Yan's feelings. When had he ever seen Su Yan treat a man so gently? When had he ever seen Su Yan's hand being held in the palm of a man's hand without any resistance? If she wasn't really willing, with Su Yan's strength, how could this Yang Kai have succeeded? Junior sister, you are a genius. How could you fancy such a waste? Who are you calling a waste? Yang Kai and Su Yan turned their heads at the same time, their faces cloudy like the night before a storm. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.